Texas.
Thank you so much. And Chairman, we may need some ADHD medicine up in here. You know, I will applaud my colleagues that understood that this was about telework and didn't somehow veer off into trans children and veer off into talking about a president who will go down in history as one of the best presidents that we have ever had in this country. And he was able to do it while we were showing up to work, but somehow we physically showed up to the building, but we know that this was the most unproductive Congress that we had in the 118th. So thank God for Joe Biden, who absolutely got so much done in a record amount of time. He only had the 117th where he had actual adults in the room. And actually in the 117th, the interesting part is that it was COVID, and guess what? They got to vote remotely, and somehow they ended up with the Infrastructure Act. Somehow they ended up with the Chips and Science Act. Somehow they ended up with the first gun bill that we have had to do anything as it relates to gun violence in this country in almost 30 years. And honestly, the list goes on, and so many of your districts are going to benefit for so long because of the work of Joe Biden, and he only had a Congress to help him out in one term, so God bless him. I will also say, as we are talking about the accomplishments of the Biden-Harris administration, rural broadband was a very real thing. And I can remember Republicans that did not vote for the rural broadband celebrating all the money that their states were going to get. And the reason that I'm going to talk about it is because while I do represent a pretty urban area now, I lived in East Texas. I also lived in Western Arkansas. So I have lived in rural America. And one of the interesting things about rural America, and I want rural America to listen up because most Democrats are not representing very rural areas. But let me tell you, whether I represent a rural area or not, I believe that as a U.S. representative, I should do what makes sense for U.S. citizens. And the right thing was to make sure that we did expand broadband. You know what that meant? That meant that people in rural America who tend to end up in towns like the one that I lived in Texarkana, where they rely on, say, the paper mill, or they rely on the tire plant, they rely on these businesses or the chicken plant. If for some reason one of those shuts down, it shuts down the entire economy. But by making sure that broadband was a reality there as well as everywhere else, guess what? They can actually participate and get some of these jobs. But let's talk about the reality of the struggles that we have when it comes to the federal government, because Lord knows if I got out of the federal government, I would make more money too. We are missing out on a lot of talent by not trying to make sure that we are offering a competitive environment. And when we miss out on that talent, unfortunately, it's not a theoretical person that struggles. It is the real American citizen that struggles. In fact, I think the American people are going to recognize that they don't necessarily have the best talented people that are about to run this country, and instead we have a lot of trivial trolls. But I'm going to move on to make sure that I can clear up something. Republicans have done a lot to perpetrate the narrative that Mr. O'Malley gave away the farm when he reached an agreement with the unions at the Social Security Administration in November 2024 to amend the existing bargaining agreement. We know that's false. Ranking Member Connolly showed that Mr. O'Malley's shrewd bargaining tactics ceded very little in exchange for averting potentially billions in legal liability to SSA. But let's talk about a time right when departing officials actually did give away the farm and sell out the American people for political gain. Ms. Gressler, do you recall when then President Trump's acting Department of Homeland Security Deputy Secretary Ken Cuccinelli struck an 8-year agreement with the union at Immigration and Customs Enforcement on January 19, 2021, one day before President Biden was sworn into office?
I was not aware of that.
Okay. All right, well, let me tell you about it. So, Ken Cuccinelli, who, by the way, was found to be illegally appointed, essentially gave the union de facto control over the agency. He included a provision in the last second collective bargaining agreement that would have required the Biden administration to secure, quote, prior affirmative consent from the ICE union's 7,000 members before enacting any new enforcement policies or practices. In addition, the agreement specifically authorized the union to reject direct orders from the president, including Mr. Biden's order to focus on federal resources on on violent criminals to protect our communities. The agreement would have irrevocably blocked the government's ability to challenge the authority of the ICE union for 8 years. Unlike the deal Mr. O'Malley was able to get for the American taxpayers with his collective bargaining agreement, the Cuccinelli negotiated agreement was a blatant and egregious attempt by one administration to tie the hands of its successor. In fact, it was such a bad deal for the Americans that Tom Homan, you may know the name, Trump's current pick for the top border security role, which is border czar, and former acting director of ICE, proclaimed it, quote, not good for the agency. I don't recall the outrage on the other side of the aisle in this committee, though, about that agreement. Mr. Davis or Ms. Gressler, do you remember any of our Republican members expressing concerns about Mr. Cuccinelli's CBA?
And then your time's expired, but feel free to answer Ms. Crockett's question.
I don't know anything about it.
I'm not aware of it either, but I would note that they probably did not follow those rules given the mess that happened at the border.
Okay.
The last thing that I'll do.
Gentlemen, gentlelady's time's expired.
it's
No,
not-
you complained when somebody,
You
we got a
unanimously-
UC request?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
I'm asking for unanimous consent to enter into the record a March 2021 New York Times article entitled Trump's Official Last Day Deal with ICE Union Ties Biden's Hands.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair
Chair.
recognizes a copy on their desk. The clerk will designate the amendment.
An amendment to the rules of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform for the 119th Congress is offered by Mr. Garcia of California.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we are obviously all aware as a committee that the President of the United States should serve the American people, never their own financial interests. Yet we're facing some of the most serious conflicts of interest going into this administration in the history of our country. Now, Donald Trump and Elon Musk, who are at least appearing to essentially be co-presidents in this next few years, are plotting to remake our government and our very social safety net. And they could get, of course, we know, richer in the process. Now, this amendment will make sure that we don't advance any legislation from this committee that enriches Donald Trump or his businesses. And unfortunately, as we know, because of the work of this committee and House Democrats, this legislation could not be more important because we know and we saw Donald Trump trying to enrich himself and his family in his first term. Now, we know that committee Democrats showed that Donald Trump received payments from over 20 countries during his first term. 20 countries. Donald Trump's network of businesses made it possible for anyone in the world to funnel money to him through his businesses. Now, these countries, of course, included China, Saudi Arabia, and many others. Now, we actually have, because of this committee, receipts and documents that prove that he received at least $7.8 million directly from foreign governments. And by the way, that number is much larger, but of course we don't have all the documents and receipts because this committee's majority blocked us from getting all of them. We also know that 8 ambassadors stayed at President Trump's D.C. hotel at the time while serving in the office of the Trump administration in clear violation of the Constitution. The committee also found that Elliot Brody, a Republican fundraiser and lobbyist, spent $15,000 at Trump's D.C. hotel while actually lobbying the Trump administration. Later, he received a pardon, which we know that Donald Trump and his administration like to give out to people that donated to him. And we know that that, of course, is a clear violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Now, we should all be concerned that this lobbying effort signifies a pay-to-pay scheme that capitalizes on President Trump's influence. And these conflicts of interest are a direct threat and a national security threat. Of course, this is on top of the fact that this committee continues to refuses to investigate Jared Kushner, who received $2 billion with a B directly from Saudi Arabia just months after leaving the White House, and has used that power to facilitate record arms deals and other pro-Saudi policies. As he enters his second term, this amendment is incredibly important so that we can ensure that Donald Trump isn't directly benefiting through his businesses by foreign governments and other people that are interested. Once again, this amendment would ensure that we work through this committee to ensure the president does not directly benefit. I urge all of my colleagues to support this common sense amendment, and I yield back.
Would my friend yield?
Yes, sir.
Just for some questions. Mr. Garcia, is it not true that when President Trump was elected in 2016, the then president of the Philippines, President Duterte, actually named a business partner of President Trump to be a special envoy to the United States?
Absolutely, sir. And as you all know, and much beyond that, Donald Trump has continued through his family and through his businesses, gain the influence in foreign governments and then trade them for policy proposals.
Is it not also true, Mr. Garcia, that a number of Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia among them, actually pointedly would stay at or rent rooms and facilities at the then Trump Hotel downtown in order, presumably, to curry favor?
Saudi Arabia and many other countries, yes, sir.
And did President Trump then, in fact, financially benefit from those transactions?
Directly against the Constitution, absolutely, sir.
And is there a policy at GSA, the Government Service Administration, that actually would prohibit an elected official from benefiting from a lease owned by or provided by GSA?
That is correct.
And was that honored in the first Trump administration?
Absolutely not, which is why this amendment is needed.
I thank my friend.
Thank you.
All right, Chair, recognize Mr. McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I heard some accusations on the other side about President Trump being corrupt, and I would say that they tried to put him in jail. They tried to bankrupt him with lawfare. We all know the Russiagate and the perfect phone call. And then, of course, he took a bullet for this country. And of every president in my lifetime, in our lifetime, he left office with less money, not more money. And he did more in 4 years than any president in my lifetime. Every president in my lifetime talked about a peace treaty in the Middle East, and they got 0. And President Trump got 2. And we talk about the greatest economy when record unemployment, especially for minorities and black people and women, when you have low unemployment, record unemployment, you have less people living on the street and you have less people dying on the street. And we look at the foreign wars like Ukraine, Russia, you look at October 7th, Israel, we all know those things would not have happened if President Trump were in office. He is not a corrupt president. He loves our country. He loves the American people. He loves all people. And I'm excited that we are going to be able to work on oversight, hold government accountable, and help him put America first and not America last. I yield the remainder of my time.
Gentlemen, yield back. Any further members seek recognition? Mr. Jack from Georgia.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just add, President Trump was one of the last or most recent presidents and one of the shining examples of a president that did not take a salary. From the day he was sworn in through the day he left office, he donated a salary to a lot of incredible causes. So I would urge the gentleman to withdraw this amendment. I think it's an offense to the American people that gave President Trump and House Republicans a mandate, a clear mandate this past election. And again, if you want to talk about conflict of interest, when the President of the United States does not accept a salary, I think that demonstrates the unique nature that he has and the connection that he has to the American people, wanting to serve them and show that he's not in this for the money. He lost money getting elected. He sacrificed so much. There's no reason for this non-germane amendment. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Ms. Stansbury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, notwithstanding these beautiful love letters and campaign ads to Donald Trump, this committee has examined a multitude of thousands of pages of evidence and receipts that show that Donald Trump did actually take foreign money through and launder through his hotels and properties. And I know we got some new members on the committee, but we're happy to provide that documentation to you as well. But with that, I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to Mr. Garcia.
Thank you. I think it's comical to say that Donald Trump didn't take a salary when he and his family benefited in the billions of dollars from peddling influence to foreign governments. This has actually been documented. The receipts were presented through this committee from multiple countries, and the fact that your son-in-law, who was, by the way, advised to not serve as an envoy by the Secretary of State at the time of Donald Trump, could come in and make $2 billion months after leaving the White House by the Saudi government, of which, by the way, he has not returned any sort of investment to the country on, and him being the envoy to the Middle East while he was in the White House, is absolutely corrupt. And the president's salary is nothing compared to what he and his family have received in the billions of dollars through their foreign peddling and corruption in the White House. I'll yield back. I actually yield to Ms. Crockett.
Thank you so much. listen, if y'all really believe this, I will do this in a very diplomatic, bipartisan way. We are sitting in the proper committee that can do the investigation. If you feel as if there is nothing to see, then prove us wrong. Prove us wrong, because the last time that I checked, we were shut down as we were getting documents from his attorneys. So if you say that there's nothing there, then let's go ahead and have a hearing and an investigation and prove us. Show it to the American people that we don't have to be concerned that this incoming president has been paid off by the likes of people that don't like the American citizens that live in this country. Because last time I checked, he was palling around with Putin and he's loving on Xi Jinping. I mean, like, I don't know what you have to hide then. So in oversight, let's go ahead, Chairman, can we go ahead and get a hearing set up and an investigation just to prove us wrong? Because
Would the lady yield?
Hold on, Mr. Chairman, because we lying, according to y'all. We lying. So prove us to be liars. I will sit here and I will be the first one to say, I apologize. So let's go ahead and do it. Will you do that, Mr. Chairman?
Let me ask, will the lady yield a question?
I will absolutely yield the question.
So you're suggesting that we investigate Donald Trump?
Yes, because y'all saying that we lying about him.
My
Y'all
question
prove
is,
us
have
wrong.
there ever been any other investigations of Donald Trump? Have there
Yes.
been any? I mean,
Yes, there have been.
it just seems like
And
he's
he
the
had a
most
couple of
investigated
impeachments,
person
too.
in the world. And look, I love this newfound concern for ethics by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. This is rich, to be honest with you, especially when you were talking about violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. I think Mr. Garcia, Mr. Frost one mentioned, and things like that. So, you know, I think there's a lot of interesting things coming that I haven't heard over the past 2 years. So, look.
So, Mr. Chairman,
we'll-
is that a yes or no that y'all gonna prove
Well,
us wrong?
Ms. Crockett, there have been so many investigations of Donald Trump. You have weaponized, I would argue, and I think the American people would agree, that the judiciary has been weaponized, that the man has had so many
But,
investigations.
Mr. Chair, if you are
And-
the one that's conducting it, we know that he trusts you.
You're
a
wanting
good
to
Republican.
investigate him, and he hasn't even been sworn in yet.
Okay, well, we can wait a few more days. That's only on Monday, and we can get started. I just want y'all to prove us wrong, because
Well, I think
believe
the
in
American
functioning
people
in
are
facts.
concerned about their tax dollars being flushed down the commode.
I think
being
they're
spent-
also concerned about foreign influence upon
Foreign
the highest.
influence.
Absolutely. Why wouldn't they be? That is something that would fall under our purview in this committee. And Mr. Chairman,
with all
listen,
due respect, ma'am, you weren't concerned about $27 million of foreign influence that was laundered. Now, Ms. Stansberry, laundered, we can debate on the term of laundering. I don't think you
Would you like
understand
to?
what laundering means.
You yield? We can,
But that,
we can
no,
discuss
Well,
because
it's
this
only
is Ms.
15
Ms.
seconds.
Crockett's time, and it's about to
I will go
expire.
ahead and yield to Ms. Stansbury then.
She's got 10 seconds.
All right. Well, Mr. Chairman, this is a bit absurd, but you know, it's very clear this committee did investigate. Donald Trump did launder his
Time's
money
expired.
through
Any
his
further member seek
hotels,
recognition?
and we will provide the
Mr. Chair.
report which you suppressed. Thank you.
Mr. Gill, Chair recognizes Mr. Gill from Texas.
Thank you. I find it rich that the other side of the aisle is suddenly concerned about corruption and ethics. Whenever President Biden just gave his son a 10-year blanket pardon for foreign influence peddling and whatever else he was doing while high on whatever drugs with whatever prostitutes. I also find it rich that all of the sudden the other side has some problem with successful businessmen being involved in politics whenever you guys are the party of George Soros, of Bill and Melinda Gates, of Sheryl Sandberg, of Mackenzie Bezos, of Taylor Swift, of so many other billionaires across the country, as well as every woke, weird pervert in Hollywood. I find this incredibly disingenuous. I think the reality is that the Republican Party under President Trump has a very clear mandate from voters, and you guys don't like it because voters rejected everything you stand for and every policy that you've shoved down the American people's throats over the past 4 years, whether it's open borders, a failing economy, raging inflation, this weird woke stuff that you guys have been shoving down our children's throats, and the voters rejected you and they welcomed our party. So with that, I yield my time, but I find this conversation incredibly rich from the other side.
Gentleman yields back. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, the question is on the amendment offered by Mr. Garcia. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed by saying no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not. You seek a recorded vote?
Yeah, please, sir.
All right. Mr. Garcia requests a recorded vote. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Is this 5? Any further members seek recognition?
Mr. Chair,
Chair, recognize Ms. Crockett.
I have an amendment.
Thank you, Chair Lady.
I now recognize the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Crockett, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Talcove, I'm just going to go ahead and pick up where you left off really quickly. Just to be clear, the upgrades that you're talking about as it relates to our data processes, these aren't things that would be free, are they? They would cost some kind of money. Not looking for a number, but they will cost, correct?
Some are free and some would cost money.
Okay. All right. So I just want to leave it there because we've had a number of these hearings. So I do want to be clear, before the Trump administration came in, this committee did exist in the form of the Oversight Committee, and our task is to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. In that vein, we had a number of hearings, at least last term. I can't speak for any other term as I'm only in my sophomore term, and we dealt with improper payments. And interestingly enough, our chairwoman, who is so passionate about this today, she missed every single one of those improper payment hearings. But just to be clear, I was there, so I don't want anyone to believe that Democrats just come to work and don't plan to do work. In fact, I'm trying to figure out exactly what it is that the Republicans believe our job is, because right now they have relinquished their constitutional duties over to an unelected bureaucrat, someone who no one went out to vote for. And absolutely, he is occupying the Oval Office, as we saw yesterday. And that is a first for me, to see someone occupying the Oval Office who's never actually been elected to the Oval Office and actually answering more questions than the person that allegedly got elected. But for whatever reason, this is the first time we're having a DOGE subcommittee hearing, and that guy's not here. Instead, we have y'all. So I do want to thank you for coming. But I will say this. It's also interesting to me that in the first few days of DOGE existing, we know that they are trying to get rid of the Department of Education, USAID, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They're laying off FAA workers. They are going after the FDA, the CDC, the HHS, the FBI agents, and they're talking about getting rid of FEMA. And they brought y'all in. And I am going to say that I actually was shocked that there was only one person that seemed like he was an overt Trumper as you laid out your opening remarks, because I anticipated that at least one of y'all would say, yes, what Elon is doing is exactly what we would prescribe. But instead, I will applaud you because you actually were focused. You talked about what the American people are looking for us to do. We've actually consistently on this side of the aisle promoted this idea of making investments into technology so that we can do things such as, say, look at the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense that takes up approximately, 50% of our discretionary income, or our discretionary spending. Approximately 50% goes to Department of Defense. Department of Defense has not been able to pass an audit in the last 6 audits, and we're not talking about pennies. I understand that we want everything to be perfect, and if we could get all waste, fraud, and abuse out, that would be fantastic. But let me talk about the big numbers. The big numbers are on that side. When we look at, say, our entire workforce, our federal workforce, as we're trying to somehow fire all of them, they don't even make up a total of 5%. It's even less than that when we look at our budget. But let's talk about defense. That just happens to be the same side of the ledger that Mr. Musk gets the vast majority of his money from. In fact, at the same time that they were unlawfully, and we will stay in court, because on this side, we believe in law and order. We believe in, I mean, a number of us are actually lawyers, but nevertheless, we understand the Constitution. We believe in that as well. And so there's things such as, impoundment, right? Because as Mr. Whitson said, he said, we need to return the power of the purse to Congress. It never left. According to the Constitution, that's where it's at. Now, I know that people are confused right now because for whatever reason, we had a guy that went in, and you talk about people invading our data. Listen, people said that they were upset about TikTok, but I'm upset about the guy that runs Twitter, who for sure is doing nefarious things, because I don't understand, if you are trying to conduct audits and figure out where the waste, fraud, and abuse is, I don't know why you would go to some tech guy. In fact, it was only techies that were sitting there at inauguration. We didn't have auditors. I would welcome auditors to come in and do forensic audits. In fact, he sat there in the Oval Office yesterday and he admitted that he was lying, and he was using his propaganda machine to do it when he said that we sent millions of dollars to Gaza for condoms. That was a lie. So let me tell you something.
The gentlelady's
elected,
time has expired.
And it is time for
The
us
gentlelady's
to do our
time has
jobs
expired.
and rein in this rogue actor known
The
as
gentlelady's
Elon
time
Musk.
has expired.
From 2 years ago. EU law sets the stage for a clash over disinformation. I just want to read one paragraph into the record here, too. The law, the Digital Services Act, which Mr. Taibbi just referenced, is intended to force social media giants to adopt new policies and practice to address accusations that they routinely host and through their algorithms popularize corrosive content. If the measure is successful, as officials and experts hope, which has happened, its effects could extend far beyond Europe, changing company policies in the United States and elsewhere. That's where they get the leverage and pressure on the companies to censor Americans. In Europe, don't have it in Brazil, but Mr. Schellenberger has felt it firsthand in Brazil. That's why we're focused on this issue. The gentlelady, Ms. Crockett, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just in case I go over, I just wanted to note that the previous speaker went over by a minute. We've heard a lot about the fact that Democrats have been talking about Elon Musk. And let me give you a news alert. We're not going to stop talking about him. We're going to keep talking about him until he is out of here. Now, if he wants to be elected or appointed and confirmed to something, then so be it. But as of right now, we have somebody that for whatever reason, I don't know if y'all just trying to play in our face because you think we're stupid, or if you literally just cannot see the difference in a George Soros and a Bill Gates. But let me give you a little bit of the difference. Number one, George Soros nor Bill Gates ever somehow decided to turn off the spigot of money that was going through to various organizations and agencies to the extent that it had actually been ordered by law that they should have access to it, to the extent that people are dying. There are people that have died as a result of this antic, and there are now farmers that are screaming that they may lose their family farms because we have over $500 million worth of food that is sitting and not going anywhere because of the attempt to shut down U.S. aid. So let me tell you, that is the big difference between the two of them. And let me also tell you that a big difference between Democrats and Republicans is that we don't just say we believe in the Constitution, but we walk it like we talk it. What does that mean? That means that if we believe in the Constitution, we don't just pick out the Second Amendment and say that it is limitless, nor do we pick out the First Amendment and say that it is limitless. The thing about the Constitution is that it has always been a balancing test. There are limits to this. And right now, what we continue to hear from a certain side of the aisle is that there are no limits to this lawlessness. In fact, there are limits. And I can tell you that one of those limits typically is around hate crimes. You may or may not know that when it comes down to it, if somebody decides that they want to send something hateful in, say, the U.S. mail, they can actually go to prison for that, up to 5 years in prison. So yes, there are always going to be limits. So when we start to talk about Trump and him being pulled down on any platform, this just happened to be after he incited an insurrection. This just happened to be after, in a bipartisan way, this particular chamber decided that they were going to impeach him. So there was something a little different about what he did, because as we know, it led to people actually dying. But let's talk about who's doing the nefarious things with the tech giants. Because I don't think that one side of the aisle is promoting truth, but sometimes it may seem a little treasonous. All right, so we've got this article right here about this guy. Meta says it will end its fact-checking program on social media posts. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Then we have Washington Post says it will not endorse a candidate for president. We also know that actually they absolutely intended to endorse Kamala Harris. We have this one. Google Maps now show Gulf of America instead of Gulf of Mexico for app users in the United States, which is a complete farce because it's the Gulf of Mexico. It always has been. And we know that the AP got kicked out yesterday because they refused to buy into this lie, because that's all y'all really want to promote is lies. That's the big issue that we have. Elon Musk boosted false U.S. aid conspiracy theories to shut down global aid. Now, while he was boosting those lies about U.S. aid, and he was stopping money going for, say, things such as Head Start, somehow the only money that didn't stop was the money to him and his organization. Now, I don't know how you can have him be the watchdog as well as the guy that is literally living off of the government. If we want to talk about government welfare, it looks like Elon Musk, because it's my understanding that just on yesterday, a new contract was approved for approximately $300 million for Elon Musk. So listen, I just want y'all to be honest. You want to sit here, you want to lie, because so often we hear, well, you know, yeah, we did lie. In fact, he admitted that he lied when he was in the Oval Office yesterday. But if it's a lie that will get you into office, such as saying, I know nothing about Project 2025, yet on day one, you literally do everything that you can to implement it, including making sure that you put, say, one of the main architects of Project 2025 over the OMB, it's okay, so long as you get the power that you seek. The problem is that the game is going to be on the American people. And when I say the American people, I mean all of us. Unfortunately, I am also stuck in the twilight zone because of the lies that were allowed to be propagated. Just like when you're talking about vaccines and all this nonsense. Right now in my state of Texas, there is an outbreak of measles. And what they are finding is that because there's been so much disinformation about vaccines, that kids are sick right now with measles that they did not have to have if they just trusted doctors and experts instead of randoms online. So I will end by saying this, Mr. Chairman, because I know we believe in Jesus in this chamber. In John 8:32, it says, the truth shall set you free. So maybe we should focus on a little bit of truth in this chamber. I'll yield.
Generally yields. Gentleman with.
I look forward to working with you and the rest of this committee on behalf of the American people. Before I was elected to Congress or to the Texas House of Representatives, I was a public defender and civil rights attorney by trade. I know about the Department of Justice and what they're supposed to be doing. I am also very concerned by a rogue DOJ, or one that is not beholden to the American people. I am very concerned about the DOJ being weaponized by the White House. I am concerned about the FBI being used for purposes outside of our domestic security and maintaining peace at home. So weaponization of the Department of Justice. This phrase, the weaponization of government, is something that has been overly used and repeated by my Republican colleagues. They use it as a war cry, a battle call, to justify dismantling federal agencies and the purging of thousands of hardworking, dedicated federal servants who swore an oath to protect the Constitution and the rule of law. If the purpose of this hearing today is to examine and expose the weaponization of government, specifically the weaponization of Department of Justice, then it is essential that we understand what exactly weaponization means. Fortunately, history is kind to us. Last Congress, the House Judiciary Committee held numerous hearings on this notion of weaponization. And in those hearings, Republicans described weaponization as, quote, corruption, quote, government abuse and political treachery, having the government act, quote, against people who were innocent and did nothing wrong, quote, targeting people of one political persuasion. And as one of my colleagues aptly described, quote, if you speak up about the abuses you are seeing, excuse me, or are sharing information that may not fall in line with the political narrative, you will be suspended without pay, have your security clearance revoked, or your life will be turned upside down. It's pretty clear that the MO is, if you don't comply, they will retaliate. If you don't agree with their political agenda, you get suspended. They do it in such a way to deter others from speaking up and speaking out. These are not my words. These are not the words of Ranking Member Raskin or Leader Jeffries. These are the words of congressional Republicans. This is what they believe embodies weaponization. I am the first to admit that I don't often agree with many things that my Republican colleagues say, but wholeheartedly concur with their descriptions here. What concerns me, however, is the inability of my colleagues on the other side to connect the dots that are in front of them, while the rest of America is watching as this DOJ weaponization takes hold right before our eyes. And to be clear, what we are witnessing happening before us satisfies the descriptions used by my Republican colleagues. Corruption. Any lawyer with a good head on their shoulders will tell you that the recent attempt by Trump's DOJ to drop the corruption case against Mayor Adams is ironically riddled with corruption itself. This decision to try and drop this case was never about some flawed argument or approach by the DOJ. In fact, even acting Deputy Attorney General Emile Beauvais, in his February 10th letter to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, the office handling the case stated that the Department of Justice's attempt to drop this was done, quote, without assessing the strength of the evidence or legal theories on which the case is based, inherited. Instead, it is trying to drop the case because Trump's DOJ is, quote, particularly concerned about the impact of the prosecution on Mayor Adams' ability to support critical ongoing federal efforts to protect the American people from the disastrous effects of unlawful mass immigration and resettlement. Put differently, the Department of Justice wants Mayor Adams to give fealty to Trump and also use him to execute Trump's immigration policy in New York City. The blatant corruption of this quid pro quo alone should warrant this subcommittee to investigate the current weaponization of this Department of Justice. But this is far from the only example of weaponization occurring before us. Next, government abuse and political treachery. Make no mistake, acting Deputy Attorney General Emile Beauvais ordering Brian Driscoll, the then acting director of the FBI, to turn over a list of not just current but also former FBI staff who were assigned, quote, at any time to investigations and or prosecutions related to the events that occurred at or near the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, end quote. It is a clear illustration of government abuse targeting employees they wrongfully claim are political adversaries. In fact, rather than utilize the FBI's time and resources to protect America from cyber attacks, terrorism, and other violent crimes, Trump's DOJ is choosing to spend resources to build loyalty to Trump. If that is not government abuse, I just don't know what is. Third, the view that the government is acting, quote, against people who were innocent and did nothing wrong. For those of you who may not be familiar, when career prosecutors and staff at DOJ are assigned to cases, they take these tasks on not because of power or politics, but because it is quite simply part of the job. It's rare that prosecutors get every case they want. Instead, prosecutors and staff are assigned cases because of their capacity, experience, and expertise. But where we see commitment to the Constitution and the rule of law, the Trump DOJ sees reason for retribution. This has already taken shape in various forms, but notably, on January 27th, Trump's then acting Attorney General James McHenry fired DOJ officials, on those of which worked on federal criminal investigations into Trump. Let me repeat this. They fired DOJ officials who did nothing wrong. These officials simply did their jobs. Now, finally, quote, targeting people of one political persuasion. While I just briefly touch on this point, I want to be very clear with the American people. Within the last 35 days, Trump's DOJ has already sent inquiry letters to Democratic members of Congress for speaking out and criticizing Elon Musk. Our task on this subcommittee today is to conduct real congressional oversight of the Department of Justice, because this notion of weaponization is not simply a threat, it is a reality. The public is worried. Career attorneys are worried. Congress is worried. The world is worried. Every day that passes, the Department of Justice is losing institutional knowledge and exceptional attorneys because of a blind arrogance and vengeance. We owe it to this country to come together to call out weaponization happening today, to call out corruption, government abuse, attacks on innocent people, and the targeting of people with different political views. We owe it to everyone to speak the truth, even if the truth is hard to hear. We owe it to us all to preserve our country's rule of law. And the final point that I'll make is that there were a number of attorneys that were brought up in the chairman's opening remarks. Attorney General Letitia James of New York, as well as DA Fani Willis. I do want to point out that each of these women are women that were duly elected in their states, and Fani Willis was just reelected. That is not federal lawfare. That is not weaponization of the federal government. Both of those women work on the state level. And the final point that I'll make is that while they work on state levels, there were only a certain amount of cases that were able to be tried prior to the election. Any cases that did take place, whether they were civil cases or federal cases, I do want to point out, regardless of who brought those cases ultimately, at least the ones that did go, they ultimately went to juries. They went to juries that were full of American citizens, juries that were not asked, are you going to sit here and support Donald Trump and his agenda, or do you have some left-wing agenda? They were given an opportunity to hear the evidence, and they were able to rule based on the evidence that was presented to them. I am someone who misses the courtroom every single day, as I practiced for 17 years before entering into Congress. And if we continue to pretend as if the voices of everyday American citizens don't matter when they have an opportunity to listen to both sides of a case and make a decision, then we really are in for a rude awakening in this country. One thing that we should do as members of Congress is we should preserve our institutions and make sure we build them up to the point that people have trust. And when you walk into a courtroom, you have no idea who's walking in and who just decided that they would actually show up for jury duty. And I am here to tell you that I still believe in that imperfect but beautiful system that we have in this country, known as the jury system. And with that, I will yield.
Thank you, Ranking Member. Quickly point out that the President did ask his attorneys for a neutral.
Chair recognizes Ms. Crockett.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Dudero, I'm going to pick up where my colleague left off by number one, thanking you for your service. Even though, I mean, I don't really know if they would have been trying to push you out too, because it seems like anybody that knows what their job is gets pushed out. So congrats on your retirement. And I'm hoping that you have sunnier days ahead. But Ms. Tlaib just went through a series of things that she feels like this is, other than efficiency. And I have a term for what I believe is going on. I think it's just downright cruel. I think that you have people that literally do not have a heart. They're telling us that, oh, no, we're going to run the federal government like a business. Well, let me talk to you about the people that are allegedly running this business, because the federal government ain't a business. But let me clarify. If it was, I don't want it run like the president has run businesses. The president, it's my understanding, has filed bankruptcy 6 times. We don't have that luxury in the United States of America. But even when we start to think about Elon Musk, right now, as it relates to Tesla, the sales are down. As it relates to X, he has never made a profit since he bought X. In fact, the value of X is 75% lower than it has ever been. So if I am going to go look for somebody to run a business, I'm going to look for someone who is going to run one successfully. And before people start screaming and yelling about, well, he's a billionaire, yeah, when you know the right people and they'll just give you money, then you can become a billionaire too. And maybe one day all of us will have that kind of access. But until then, I want to talk about the fact that congressional Republicans, again, as it's been stated, they don't care about government efficiency no more than they care about government services and programs that constituents rely on. And just like Elon is hiding from this committee, Republicans are now hiding from their constituents. Under the current Republican budget proposal, 166,000 people in the chairman's district could lose their Medicaid benefits, including more than 70,000 children. The same for the chairwoman of the DOGE subcommittee. Under the current budget proposal, 120,000 people in her district could lose Medicaid benefits, including 75,000 children. This is what efficiency looks like to Republicans, selling out their own constituents to pass tax cuts for their billionaire donors and friends. And rather than taking GAO's recommendations and discussing how Congress can help make federal employees and agencies more efficient, effective, and supported, they're firing probationary federal employees, which again, in my opinion, has led to planes actually falling out of the sky. But nevertheless, which is crazy because no one has been more unproductive than the Republicans on the Oversight Committee. Nevertheless, Mr. Dodaro, of the 38 high-risk areas in GAO's 2025 report, more than half are due in part to staffing or skills gaps, which you've already discussed. In your written testimony to the committee, you stated, quote, "When we have seen progress on high-risk issues, it has typically involved 3 essential elements: congressional action or oversight, commitment from top leaders at agencies, and active involvement by the Office of Management and Budget. In your opinion, has Congress done enough to ensure the mass indiscriminate purging of federal workforce doesn't, quote, impede the government from cost-effectively serving the public and achieving desired results? Yes or no?"
Well, I talked before about telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Sometimes it's not a yes or no. I think Congress should get more engaged and proactive in this area. I've always encouraged administrations in the past to consult Congress in making some changes. Many of these things deal with laws that Congress passed, and I think Congress needs to get more active.
I agree. We need to do our constitutional duty, which is to conduct oversight. So again, I'm inviting Elon or anybody else that's a member of DOGE to come through and we can have a conversation. In fact, I am not aware of any recommendations that really go beyond just cutting those services that people need. There's not been any talk about cutting any of Elon's contracts, though. Not a one. Not that I'm aware of. Maybe you're aware of it, but you are aware that Elon has been getting money from the federal government for a number of years, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it's my understanding that he has not made a recommendation to cut any of his money as we are trying to save money and save this country. At the end of the day, what I am going to say is that we had the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration open 5 investigations on Tesla for complaints of unexpected braking, loss of steering control, and crashes while cars were in self-driving mode. And Tesla tried to block at least 2 rulings from the National Labor Relations Board punishing Elon for tweeting that factory workers would lose stock options if they joined a union. This is a problem. Can you at least tell me that you agree, that you understand what a conflict of interest is, and that Elon
I am well aware of what a conflict of interest is, and we've been asked by the Congress to take a look at this situation, and we will.
Well, I appreciate that. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will yield.
5 minutes.
Thank you so much. It should not be surprising that the president is doing everything possible to make it more difficult for the media to hold him accountable and for the public to be informed about his reckless and illegal behavior. Yet here we are. The Republicans have actually organized this goofy hearing to try to convince the American people that PBS and NPR are, quote, domestic terrorists, or domestic threats, my apologies, not the incompetent, unqualified Secretary of Defense who's texting war plans to journalists. But it's y'all, PBS and NPR, the American people are supposed to be worried about. You can't make this up. It's as stupid as it sounds. The American people should be worried about the president threatening to investigate NBC for treason for reporting on his felony convictions, or arresting reporters and stripping networks of their licenses for not saying nice things about him or not using Gulf of America. The Republicans' witness, Mr. Gonzalez, went so far as to suggest that because NPR and PBS reported on the murder of George Floyd, they, quote, represent a danger to our physical health as well as to civic health of our body politics. Ms. Mayor, do you think reporting on the murder of George Floyd and highlighting instances of systemic racism is a domestic threat to America?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I believe it's our responsibility to report on all issues of interest to the American public.
Thank you so much. Ms. Kerger, what about you?
I agree. I think it's important for us to report on the important news of the day.
So let's talk about the critical role of public media. During his first term, President Trump's own Department of Homeland Security highlighted the importance of public broadcasting's role in public safety. In 2018, his administration stated, quote, PBS and local public television stations play a crucial role in protecting communities by delivering essential information to individuals and first responders. These benefits are all made possible by public broadcasting stations' unique reach, reliability, and role across America, and are especially vital in rural and underserved areas. Madam Chairwoman, I would ask unanimous consent. I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the 2018
Without objection, so ordered.
And Madam Chair, I also seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the 2019 report titled Modernizing the Nation's Public Alert and Warning System from Trump's.
Without objection, so ordered.
In the report, FEMA encouraged, quote, the use of public broadcast capabilities to expand alert, warning, and communication capabilities to fill gaps in rural and underserved areas. Mr. Ullman, what's a more significant domestic threat, reporting the murder of George Floyd or dismantling most of America's emergency communication systems?
Can you please repeat the question for me, Congresswoman?
Which one is more of a threat, reporting the murder of George Floyd or dismantling most of America's emergency communication systems?
Dismantling the emergency systems.
And isn't it true that in Barrow, Alaska is the only, isn't it true that KBRW-AM in Barrow, Alaska is the only broadcast service available in an area of more than 90,000 square miles?
That is correct. It's also the North Slope, where the majority of all the oil production that comes from Alaska takes place.
Thank you so much. And isn't it true that without these stations' broadcast, Americans in rural communities would lack access to life-saving information and public safety alerts?
That is correct.
So in your opinion, would eliminating funding for stations in rural America like WNGH Channel 18 in the Chairwoman's District hurt Americans?
It would hurt Americans, yes.
In fact, Georgia Public Broadcasting serves as the official distributor of evacuation route information during state-ordered evacuations, and the chairwoman is here advocating to strip their funding. Look, the DOGE agenda isn't about government efficiency. It's about breeding corruption at the expense of the safety of the American people, particularly Americans living in rural or remote parts of the country. They don't care about public safety. They don't care about emergency management, and they don't care about free speech, all of which are harming American people. In fact, I'm going to skip off real quick because they have tried to come for you, Ms. Mayor, and I just want to clarify, you did not work for NPR when those statements were made, did you?
That is correct, Madam
And to
Chair.
be clear, free speech is not about whatever it is that y'all want somebody to say. And the idea that you want to shut down everybody that is not Fox News is bullshit. We need to stop playing because that's what y'all are doing in here. You don't want to hear the opinions of anybody else. And the Constitution says Congress shall make no law respecting or establishing of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
press.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
Madam Chairwoman, can I put something into the record? Unanimous consent, please.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. I'd like to put under this NPR article what Biden preemptive pardons for family members could mean for presidential powers. If I could submit to the record.
Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize the gentleman.
So much, and I appreciate the speaker for admitting openly on the record that it is unconstitutional. But the concerns that I have are around the fact that we are sitting here pretending as if we all are looking out for the Constitution, yet we are coming from completely different angles. So let me go to Professor Shaw. To be clear, which branch of government is responsible for interpreting what is and what is not legal?
Well, the Supreme Court, the Article 3 judicial branch has the final word.
So the judiciary is who it is. So it's not the legislators.
You know, I'd say every branch has an obligation to interpret the Constitution. The final word comes from the courts.
From the courts. It's not the former speakers. It's not everyday people. It's not the president. I just wanted to make sure that we understood who it was that was responsible. And what is so frustrating for so many of the American people, the ones that are watching right now and otherwise, and the reason that they're outraged and scared is because what we see right now is a diminishing of all these institutions. Right now, we have a legislative branch that has decided that it intentionally would disregard their duties. They are not checking the president whatsoever. The only check that the American people have had thus far has been from the judiciary. And the judiciary isn't pulling this out of the sky. In fact, they are coming from basic reading of like the plain language of the Constitution for all of those that are constitutionalists when we start talking about things such as what birthright citizenship is. But one of the things that I want to make sure that I get to, because there are deeper implications if we go down this rabbit hole. Imagine the type of world where the president does whatever he wants to and no one can rein him in. It's a world that right now many people are afraid of. Let me put it this way. If Joe Biden would have done an executive order for abortion, despite what the Supreme Court said, that would have been a problem. Imagine if the state of Colorado kept Trump off the ballot and other states follow suit. That would have been a problem. Or imagine if Jack Smith ignored Eileen Cannon and with the help of an activist judge decided that he was going to prosecute the sitting president anyway. The problem that we have right now is that if we continue down this road, then we will not have a rule of law because we have people that are currently serving and they're saying things like, ignore the judge's order. What it means to have law and order in this country is that you follow the order and you go through the appeals process, even if you dislike what the judge did. Thank you, and I yield.
And I'll yield back to Mr. Issa. Mr. Issa, you had a question for me, which I'll yield to you now if you want to.
Now that there's no time left. Thanks, Eric.
I'm happy to entertain it.
You're good. You're good at that, but I'll take my own time. I'll recognize myself.
We'll recognize the ranking member, Ms. Crockett, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and as I'm sure you can assume, we see this a little bit differently. Here we go again, talking about Biden, and more Biden. Today is nothing more than a dog and pony show for Republicans to avoid facing the American people for their trash policies that are killing the economy and our democracy. Despite Republicans' claim of backing the blue and being the party of law and order, we're here today because Republicans are willing to throw our country's top law enforcement agents under the bus to appease Trump and execute his political vengeance. Now, I know remembering things is hard for some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, like remembering not to add reporters into a signal chat discussing military war plans. But let me remind my colleagues that it was Trump who decided to store national secrets and classified documents next to his oversized bathtub and toilet at Mar-a-Lago. It was Trump who took the documents out of the boxes and shared them with his guests. It was Trump who told his staff to move the boxes when the FBI was coming. And it was Trump who appointed Director Christopher Wray as head of the FBI, the same director that allowed the investigation to move forward. As much as Trump and Republicans hate to accept it, we are still a country with laws. And when you break them, there are consequences. Now, make no mistake, we should all be concerned about the FBI. But my concerns as ranking member of this subcommittee, as a member of Congress, and as an attorney, as well as a citizen, are based on things called facts. And when I say facts, I mean clear, indisputable facts, not those alternative facts my Republican colleagues continue pushing onto the American people. So let's talk about facts. Fact. Even prior to being confirmed by the Senate, Kash Patel was directing officials within the FBI to fire members within the Bureau simply because they worked on the lawful investigations into Trump. Fact. Patel failed to disclose his previous work and financial ties with the country of Qatar, a country that, had you had read the Mazars report, released last year by the House Oversight Committee, you would know paid close to $500,000 to Trump while he was president of the United States. Unsurprisingly, the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force was recently disbanded, and the DOJ also cut back on its Foreign Agents Registration Act enforcement. Our enemies are jumping up and down now that we're doing their work for them. Another fact, Patel has never even been an FBI agent and is now leading the Bureau. Even one of today's Republican witnesses organizations, the Bureau, has advocated having an FBI agent lead the Bureau. But rather than confirm a director with credible, dedicated experience, the Republicans confirmed a political loyalist with no Quantico or FBI training. Talk about DEI. Didn't earn it higher. Another fact, Patel, who rails against telework, what he calls lazy agents, was working part-time in and out of Las Vegas, commuting back and forth between there and DC, while also living in the home of a GOP mega donor. Think about that for a second. Could you imagine what Republicans would have done had, say, James Comey had been living in New York part-time as the FBI director, and if his New York home was owned by, say, George Soros? Speaker Johnson would have forced a floor vote on articles of impeachment within days of this news coming out. But nevertheless, my Republican colleagues are willing to sacrifice safety for stupidity as long as it's loyal. Another fact, Patel and Trump-backed FBI leadership have redirected FBI agents who are working on investigations involving violent crimes against children and child exploitation and transferred them to work on anti-Tesla attacks and redacting Jeffrey Epstein files. Talk about FBI waste and abuse. You simply can't make this stuff up. To be clear, Director Wray testified before Congress last year, noting that, quote, if each one of the FBI's cyber agents and intelligence analysts focus exclusively on the China threat, China's hackers would still outnumber FBI cyber personnel by at least 50-1. Yet rather than hire more agents to protect against these cybersecurity threats, Director Patel is reassigning agents to redact Epstein files. Someone please tell me how this makes America safe. It's almost as ridiculous and wasteful as Patel's idea to contract the Bureau with UFC fighters. And while I have very real concerns about the current state of the FBI today, I want to be very clear. My concerns aren't with career agents, the men and women dedicating their lives to protect our country and communities. It's with the irresponsible leadership and reckless decisions coming from Patel, Trump, and DOGE staff within the FBI. Our Bureau needs resources to do its job effectively. What it doesn't need is 20-something-year-old DOGE bags reviewing materials without having undergone proper vetting and clearance. The American people have a right to be worried, but these worries shouldn't be based on Republican baseless conspiracy theories. Our country is already on a dangerous path, pushing closer to causing irreparable harm. Republican members need to wake up and put Trump loyalties aside to engage in real oversight of the current FBI before it's too late. Congress deserves it. The brave men and women at the Bureau deserve it, and the American people deserve it. I want to add one more point. As a civil rights attorney, I have had to sue law enforcement. There have been times that I can truly say that law enforcement has crossed the line. And I truly believe that there can be one or two in a bunch that can ruin everyone. The problem that I have right now, though, is that we have decided to focus in on something that my Republican colleagues have decided to term as being political. What is political is when somebody says that they are going to come back and seek retribution. What is political is firing people because they simply were following the evidence and doing their jobs as law enforcement has been trained to do. And ultimately, regardless of whether or not anyone believes that it was right to indict the president, not once, not twice, not three, but 4 times he was indicted, ultimately, each of you knows enough to know that at the end of the day, it is citizens that sit on a grand jury that are the ones that decide whether or not evidence exists to go forward with an indictment. And ultimately, when this president was convicted by a jury on the state level, it was a jury of his peers. And so I want to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your commitment. And thank you so much for the testimony that you will provide. With that, I will yield back. Should be deleted, or maybe just defunding the African American Museum. The list kind of goes on and on and on, but I am not here to talk about why they are racist. I am here to talk about some other things as it relates to immigration. So let's get to that. You know, it's interesting because we got all these theories. I don't know why we put up with getting data and facts if we just gonna sit here and talk about how we feel. So, you know, maybe we can inject some facts into these feelings. I'm not really sure. But as somebody who has actually practiced criminal defense, I don't know if there's anybody else in here who has, I can tell you that I have handled thousands of cases, not hundreds of cases, thousands on the state level in Texas, Arkansas, and the federal level. And I can tell you that, you know what? If I had to look at the vast majority of the cases that I was representing criminal defendants on, the vast majority of them just didn't happen to be immigrants. These are just the facts of my experience, and maybe the immigrants went to somebody else. I don't know, but I can tell you in my actual experience in real life, in reality, and not in this fallacy world that y'all are making up where you hate on everybody. So my Republican colleagues are here using today to continue pushing this false narrative of sanctuary cities harboring criminals, yet right here in DC, we have a 34-count felon being harbored in the White House. The hypocrisy coming from your side of the aisle over concerns regarding lawlessness is outrageous. Right now, House Republicans are conducting town halls with constituents lying about our legal system. That, quote, there is no due process if you come here illegally because you violated the law. That immigrants, quote, are not entitled to due process. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that. We all want to live in a country where we respect the law. So I'm a bit surprised that Republicans aren't up in arms with Trump detaining and deporting U.S. citizens and people who are lawfully present here in the United States. What Trump and ICE are doing is a disgrace, and it's all being done without respect for our laws. For example, Mr. Neri Alvarado, a Dallas-based baker, was arrested and deported to El Salvador prison for having an autism awareness tattoo in honor of his 15-year-old autistic brother. This was done despite never having been to El Salvador, despite having no gang affiliation, and despite having no organized crime connection. He was deported because ICE agents have been detaining, quote, all Venezuelans with tattoos. And to be clear, this type of racial profiling isn't just a one-off. In fact, the ACLU, using DHS's own data, mind you, found that at least 65% of the states and local agencies voluntarily working with ICE have records of racial profiling and civil rights violations. Mr. Franklin, first of all, and Sheriff, let me thank you for your service too, because I appreciate law enforcement. I just want to put that out there. But Mr. Franklin, Major Franklin, you're a decorated law enforcement officer. Yes or no, in your experience, does racially profiling people make communities safer?
No.
And yes or no, does ICE forcing state or local law enforcement to detain people make communities safer?
No.
You know, it's interesting because we've already, and we're gonna, do Groundhog's Day a couple of times, seemingly here. Actually, let me give you the facts real quick before I go to that. In fact, a report for the American Immigration Council found that cities that didn't enforce ICE detainers have 35.5% lower crime rates, 2.3% lower poverty rates, and rely less on public assistance, including 4.9% less for children under 18. And I do want to be clear right now, ICE is trying to work with the IRS because we actually take in billions of dollars because of immigrants in this country, and now they're gonna try to get them out. And I'm gonna tell you that the biggest issue that we have, I really don't think this should be a partisan issue, so I'm going to agree with my Republican colleagues. I think that we all should want to be in our communities. The problem that we have is that we have an incompetent administration, that everything that they touch turns to shit. Because what they do is they take a wide sweeping brush and they have decided that the enemy is now going to be immigrants instead of taking a scalpel. That's all we're asking, is to be exact in what you're doing instead of taking a sledgehammer to everything. Thank you, and I will yield.
John Lay from Texas, recognized.
I'd move to strike the last words.
John Lay is recognized.
Thank you so much. I just want to say that this is such an important amendment for so many reasons. You know, there have been actual full-blown bills because of literally one incidence of a crime victim. And here it is, we have an opportunity to restore and reinstate grant funding, save for programs such as a program that would enhance access to crime victim services for persons with disabilities, including a grant that provided American Sign Language interpretation services to domestic violence victims with disabilities. My question is, are we really that cruel? I mean, y'all have done full-blown bills where y'all have, taken away everybody else's due process rights and things like Lance Gooden, Mr. Texas, next door to me. Are you okay with victims not being able to have access to resources? You're my next door neighbor. You mute? Because you always talking to me. Okay, you're going to be mute. Okay, that's fine. I also am curious, Lance Gooden, Texas, Mr. Gooden. Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to just say that you know that I know what I'm talking about. So that's what you mean by sitting there. Did you also realize that while we are going through reconciliation, because this supposedly is about saving money, and supposedly the Republicans are more fiscally responsible than we are. So we think that victims should have access to resources cut in something like this, but the report came out today. Did you see the news, Lance, about President Trump? How he spent $220 billion, that's what it'd be, billion more dollars in his first 100 days than guess who? Joe Biden did in 2024. Imagine that. And last time I checked, Joe Biden is a Democrat. So I just want to say that as we go through reconciliation, in all seriousness, what is so frustrating for us on this side of the aisle is that we all agree that we should get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. I think it's how we have defined it. And it seems like if you're talking about victims, then it's okay. It seems like if you're talking about putting law enforcement in an even worse situation, then it's okay. It seems like if our communities are gonna be overrun, then it's okay. It seems like it's okay if it means that we are gonna deport US citizens. It seems like it's okay if we are gonna round up babies and tell them that they won't have judges. It seems like it's okay to cut funding for all of that, so long as we don't touch the budget as it relates to somebody spending time down in Mar-a-Lago and golfing. I mean, this is about our priorities. And right now, we on this side are prioritizing healthcare, we're prioritizing humanity, we're prioritizing safety. I'm just saying, when y'all have to go home, I don't know if your constituents are going, and Lance, your constituents are like right next door to mine. I don't know if they're gonna appreciate some of these votes. With that, I will yield back.
Lady yields back.
Hey y'all, so I'm jumping on really quickly. First of all, it's too cold in this building. So yes, excuse me. I know I look tacky, but this is my jacket because I'm about to head out for a second to do votes. But I wanted to make sure that I told y'all what just happened. So I've been in oversight forever today, but now we are in our markup and it is in judiciary. And let me tell y'all what they just voted for. I want y'all to take a guess. Okay. Y'all probably not gonna guess it because it don't make sense. But if you think of the most ridiculous thing that they could do, okay, I know that that's really hard too because everything that they do is quite ridiculous. But literally, they just voted. They being the other ones, not us, because we were all on the right side of history. They just voted to give Trump the ability, legally, to give him the ability to deport U.S. citizens. That is what they voted for. A bunch of elected U.S. representatives. That is how they voted. Am I telling a lie, Eric, or no?
No, I got my salad here. Mouthful. No, I'm stunned.
I'm not. But I'm glad that you... Oh, okay. Eric been here longer than me, but like...
So what we said was, we even said, you know what? Many of us will not offer any more amendments tonight. We won't vote for the overall bill. But if you agree to this, we'll drop any other amendments. We'll take the win that this would be in the bill, that you would agree U.S. citizens can't be deported. They voted to allow Donald Trump to deport U.S. citizens. And they did it during the week that we learned that a 4-year-old little girl fighting cancer, a U.S. citizen, has been deported, separated from her U.S. citizen father and her cancer treatment. So, yeah, it's kind of shocking.
Well, he's shocked. Y'all, listen now. I came in with nothing but fools. So he been here longer, so maybe he still has a little bit of shock in his life, but I don't personally. Because the fact is, we used to live in a world in which where we saw the news about that baby that got deported, the baby with cancer, because supposedly he the man that's all about the children with cancer, right? Like, that's why he made sure one of his guests was at the State of the Union was a child with cancer. So surely, even though they're cutting cancer funding, but like, it is a U.S. citizen. Like, there honestly isn't even this real thing of like deporting a U.S. citizen. As far as I'm concerned, you randomly kidnapping folk and you throwing them out of the country against their civil rights, against their constitutional rights. And frankly, how would they feel if some other country decided that they were going to just start throwing people randomly in our country? Like, that is absolutely insane. So yes, all I gotta say is y'all need to get these fools out of here. But Deborah is so much nicer about how she says things. She wasn't them real. She's one of them real good, nice lawyers. Okay, listen, I can only imagine how Deborah was in the courtroom, honey. But Deborah also sits on judiciary. So tell us, what are your thoughts? How do you explain that this is what they decided to do?
They're mean, they're heartless, and they're cruel. And they do not care about anybody except themselves. But if you're going to be able to deport U.S. citizens, then they're coming for you.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So again, like all those people that are saying that they have some sort of buyer's remorse about their votes because they never thought that this was going to impact them and that kind of stuff or whatever. Here's the reality. When we go out and make votes, instead of going out and deciding that you're going to vote for the person that is going to be quote unquote perfect, what you need to be doing is looking for somebody that at least has some common decency. Because ultimately, when it comes down to it, I can tell you, if it was somebody else that was in office other than him as the president of the United States, maybe we would have had a different result. But they are so afraid. They are afraid to do what is right. Again, I keep trying to tell people, this isn't about partisanship. This is about right versus wrong. Now listen, y'all know this fighter. She stays on the front lines, at all times. But no, tell us, because actually this was your amendment. It was. So this is the author of the amendment. And we all thought it was common sense, but as we are learning, common sense ain't so common.
Yeah. No, look, here's the thing. This amendment was not introduced because it's theoretical. No. It is actually happening that U.S. citizens are being deported, not just one, not just two, multiple U.S. citizens are being detained and deported by ICE. Yeah. Now, here's the thing. I introduced into the record the document, the policy document, the law that ICE cannot detain and deport U.S. citizens. Yeah. That's actually the law. Yeah. So it's illegal what they're doing. And Ted Lieu, our colleague, said, it's batshit crazy that you got to introduce this amendment. He said that on the record. And I said, you know what? It is batshit crazy. But the reason I have to do this
It's because they don't follow the
is
law.
because they're not following the law. And
Right.
then I asked the Republicans on the other side, you were elected by U.S. citizens, by
Right.
constituents.
Right.
And you are now saying, if you vote no on this amendment, you are saying that you're not going to stand up for the constituents, the
That
U.S.
elected.
citizens
That you work for.
that you work for,
That you
that
work
sent
for.
you here.
Right.
And it was just
The
stunning. to
ones
me.
that pay your check.
Now,
Right.
I did notice that some of them
I don't work for
just
US
didn't
I just got here by
come
magic.
to the vote because they didn't want to be
Oh, yeah,
on the
some of-
record. They didn't
yeah,
want to vote.
some of them skipped out on the vote,
They
y'all.
skipped out on the vote. So you should check the record. And if you have a Republican that represents you wherever you are, you should call them up and say, do you support Trump's ability to use ICE illegally to detain and deport U.S. citizens? Because if you don't, you should be speaking out right now. And if you do, we are in a whole hell of a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm already at the point that we are in a whole hell of a lot of trouble, to be perfectly honest. And the other thing that Pramila is too nice to say is when you looked across that aisle, for those that sit on judiciary that decided to take this vote, the reason that they can sit there and take this vote and not even blink is because so many of them sit in privilege. When I look across that aisle, I don't know. I think we have one person that may have a little bit of melanin. For the most part, they don't. And so what we know is that there's so much racial profiling that is taking place. There are certain people that maybe because they have an accent, you want to just say, oh, well, that can't be a U.S. citizen. That is not true. There are certain people, because of the complexion that they have, that is who is being targeted. So you know what? They are not concerned because they know the quote unquote types of U.S. citizens that are going to be directly impacted by this. Now, I got this legend, and I don't know if you want to say anything. He over here trying to eat. But what you got to say for the people, Mr. Nadler? Okay, yeah, he eating. He say no.
I'm ready.
Okay. New York in the building.
We in New York understand, most of us, constitutional law. We understand constitutional rights, and that's why we only have 5 Republicans.
New York, that's 5 too many, y'all. It's 5 too many, New York.
A few of whom we'll probably defeat, maybe all of them next year.
And to our fearless leader. I feel like I've been with him my whole congressional career. That's because I have, actually. What do you have to say?
Well, first of all, hello to all the friends of Jasmine Crockett out there. She's doing a fantastic job for everybody. Look, the first 2 votes have got to be read together. The first one, we said, okay, nobody should be deported from the country without due process. They refused.
Where is due process found?
Due process is found in the 5th Amendment to the Constitution.
Constitution, y'all.
And what does due process mean? It means like before they deprive you of your life, your liberty, or your property, you get to hear what the charges are against you. You get to put on your evidence, as Jasmine Crockett has done as a lawyer and as a member of Congress. There's got to be some structure to it, so it's fair, right?
Yeah.
There's got to be a neutral fact finder, right? Who decides? All right, that's all we're saying.
And hopefully prevents these mistakes.
So before you get sent out of the country, there's got to be due process. There's got to be a fair hearing, right? And our colleagues refused to vote for that, despite the fact that the Supreme Court just said in a 9-0 decision that there's got to be, and that includes everybody on that Supreme Court. That's pretty incredible that all 9 of them would actually say, yeah, we agree. There's got to be due process.
And the last time I checked, the Constitution, that's supposed to be the highest law that we have in the land. That's what I thought.
Supreme law of the
That's
land.
what I thought.
Not Donald
It's
Trump.
constitutional professor, y'all.
So the first one says, okay, we said you can't deport people without due process. The Republicans said no. The second one, Ms. Jaibal's amendment, she said, well, you can't deport or detain U.S. citizens if you're ICE, right? That's not your job.
Right.
I thought that was a slam dunk. Okay, they're not going to vote against. They voted against that. They voted it down. You put those 2 together, and they seem to be indifferent if ICE is actually detaining and deporting U.S. citizens. And guess what? That's not hypothetical. That happened last week, where there were U.S. citizen kids who were sent outside of the country. So we're entering a brave new world here with all of their Orwellian, Kafkaesque stuff. And we're just getting started, though, because we're going to now pin them down on everything. We're going to have amendments on everything to see where they really stand on the Constitution.
Yeah. So you just heard it directly from Jamie Raskin. He is trying to teach these people some constitutional law, y'all. They ain't trying to listen. They act like it's only one amendment in the Constitution, the second, and they read that one wrong. Listen, if you care about this country, if you care about the Constitution, if you care about anything, then you will go and tell somebody what we have just educated you on. I got Becca Ballant. Listen, I'm trying to let her finish. But here's the deal. It is so frustrating because we could see the writing on the walls as we went out and we tried to educate people about what it was that they were up to. If they have it their way, this country would only be full of Elon Musk and Trump and they other billionaire friends and whoever is willing to work for them for little to nothing and have no health care and not be able to really afford food and not be able to afford a roof over their head, because we are working on reconciliation, meaning we are working on the budget. And so what we were saying in these amendments was you can't fund this type of activity. That's all we were saying, because it's already illegal. So you wouldn't need to keep doing like the same law over and over. But we're like, okay, maybe we just need to take your coins away. And then maybe y'all will stop, because maybe you'll be like, well, I'm not going to get no money for doing this. So this is actually about the coins, okay? So I want to clarify, because I know some of y'all may be confused, like, well, if it's already the law, why y'all talking about it? Okay, it is the money side of it. I just want to make sure I make that clear.
Always follow the money.
Follow the money.
Always follow the money.
This is the amazing Becca Ballant.
You're too kind.
From the great state of Vermont. What do you think about what's happening so far? We got a long night ahead of us, y'all.
They are willing to throw over all of our rights. They are willing to throw over the freedom and the liberty of their own people in order to worship at the feet of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. They don't care about their constituents. They don't care about working people. It is about delivering more cash to people at the top. You follow the money and where it goes, and it's about kicking working people in the teeth, propping up people who don't need the advantages they already have, and meanwhile, creating a police state. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
With what we just saw in committee right there. They will not promise not to spend money to detain and deport American citizens.
Yeah.
This couldn't be more clear.
This is all about doing whatever it is, allowing Donald Trump the latitude to do the things that he wants to do. This is my second markup for the day. My first was in oversight, and when I was there, I mean, the things that they were trying to do, they're trying to bust up unions. They are over there saying things like, you know what, we don't want federal workers to have the protections that they would normally have in being a federal worker. We need to make them all at will so that we can fire them whenever we want to. So essentially admitting that they know that what they did when they started firing everybody, they knew it was illegal. So now they are trying to change federal worker status so that they can do this stuff lawfully. Like, I'm telling y'all, this is absolutely insane. It is bad, bad, bad. But make sure that you don't just get on IG, listen to me. Make sure that you go and you educate somebody else, because we are in this position because of a lack of education, because we allowed ourselves to be played, or we allowed ourselves to be riled up about things that, frankly, we ain't never had no president that was trying to decide what kids can play on the playground. The president is supposed to do things like make sure that those kids can have food in their mouths, roofs over their heads, and food in their mouths. I think I may have already said that. Anyway, if that buzzing you hear means I gotta go vote. But I just wanted to check in with y'all. I appreciate y'all. We gonna keep fighting. The blue team got your back.
Bring receipts. I know she has a trunk full of them.
Thank you so much to my amazing colleague from the great state of California. Mr. Speaker, I rise today with a simple but clear message. First of all, I just got to clear up a few things. Instead of the president cosplaying as the next pope, he may want to try to cosplay as an actual president of these United States. That means that he may have to do a little bit of research and decide that he wants to understand that he swore an oath. And this oath was to protect and defend the Constitution. That is the oath that he was supposedly taking on January 20th, as well as we may want the president to look into what the Declaration of Independence was about. We may want him to understand that that was a foundational document as it relates to self-determination of those who had recently gained their independence from Great Britain. I would hope that he would maybe spend a few of these days in this first 100 days, and it is sad to say that it's his second term, that he doesn't understand that the Declaration of Independence is about this idea that we are entitled to the right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that's all of us that are here. But let's go through some of the things that he did manage to do and some of the havoc that he has managed to wreak. In the first 100 days of Trump administration, we have had to, unfortunately, endure a lot of pain. This administration clearly is not ready to lead. They are only here to tear down. In just 100 days, we've witnessed an administration hell-bent on dismantling the very systems designed to protect the most vulnerable amongst us. And for Black Americans, those of us who have always carried the weight of a broken system and bad policies, the danger is real, it's tangible, and it is urgent. Let me be clear, the last 100 days have not been an accident or a fluke. He has done exactly what he said he was going to do. He gave us the blueprint in Project 2025. Some tried to warn us of the dangers, and well, here we are. Let's talk about education. Within weeks of taking office, the Department of Education quietly rescinded guidance encouraging schools to teach honest, inclusive Black history. Instead, they're attempting to whitewash history and have begun promoting so-called patriotic education, a sanitized version of history that skips over slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, and systemic racism. He signed an executive order reinstating, quote, common sense discipline practices in school, rolling back previous administrations' attempts to address racial disparities in school discipline practices. Make no mistake, these decisions have a direct impact on Black children, children who deserve a fair shot to learn in safe and supportive environments. Let's talk about housing. HUD announced plans to gut fair housing rules meant to fight discrimination. You know, the same ones that he violated back when he was a landlord so many years ago. Yeah, those same rules that were supposed to fight discrimination in lending and zoning. This means there will be even more roadblocks for Black families trying to buy a home and yet another generation locked out of building wealth. Let's talk about public safety. While they're cutting after-school programs and community violence prevention, they are pouring millions of dollars into militarizing police departments. They're criminalizing our communities while stripping away the very resources that keep us safe. And finally, money talks. So let's talk money. This administration slashed funding of 7 government agencies that provide Black communities with educational materials and economic opportunities, including the Minority Business Development Agency, the only federal agency dedicated to uplifting minority businesses. This agency helps entrepreneurs all across the country, including in my own district, keep their doors open and their workers employed. Now, it's under attack. And while all of this is happening, they're dismantling environmental protections and environmental justice, slashing funding for HBCUs, and rolling back civil rights enforcement across federal agencies. Let me repeat what that means. To roll back civil rights enforcement across federal agencies. This is the so-called DEI attacks that we continue to endure in this country. This is their way of trying to roll back the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that so many died and bled for. Mr. Speaker, this is not just about policy disagreement. This is about direct attacks on Black futures, Black prosperity, and Black freedom. This is about right versus wrong, point blank. But here's what they don't understand. We've seen this playbook, and every time they've attempted to silence us, erase us, and hold us down, we've resisted and we've pushed this country closer to the ideals it claims to hold. They are trying to bury us, but what they don't realize is that we are seeds and still we rise. I stand here a proud Black woman and a proud member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and I refuse to stand by while this administration tries to turn back the hands of time. We will resist. We will continue speaking truth to power, and we will keep organizing until everybody is free. Because in the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, nobody's free until everybody's free. I yield back.
I want
Ranking member, yes, Ms. Crockett for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for your opening. I think that we are living in a time in which the American people are hoping that we can agree on something, anything in Congress. And the fact is, the vast majority of your opening statement, I could not disagree with. The question is, while we agree that there is a problem, let's hope that Congress can do what we are supposed to do, which is agree upon a solution. Today's hearing could not come at a timelier moment, with this being National Correctional Officers Week. So thank you to all of our correctional officers. Today, approximately 35,000 correctional officers and staff are under the control of the Bureau of Prisons. And during the last 100+ days of this administration, we've seen just how little Trump cares about the BOP staff's ability to do their job overseeing and protecting roughly 155,000 incarcerated people in our federal prison system. Having been a former public defender and civil rights attorney, I can tell you that I have seen the inside of a few prisons myself. I've seen the conditions these individuals are living in. I've seen the conditions that staff are working under, and based on my experience, I can tell you correctional officer staff have one of the most difficult jobs as well as the most dangerous. And these jobs are now only getting harder. Just 2.5 months ago, Ms. Kathleen Toomey, the Deputy Director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, testified before Congress that the Bureau had over 4,000 vacant positions that need to be filled. Yet rather than doing anything to ensure adequate staffing and protect officers and inmates, Trump's Justice Department terminated the Bureau's incentive pay plan, effectively cutting Bureau officers and other employees' pay anywhere between 10 and 25%. This plan, of course, helped to retain and recruit people for jobs within the BOP. Then on March 27, 2025, Trump issued an executive order eliminating BOP's labor union, which is comprised of roughly 30,000 officers and staff. All this comes after GAO added BOP to its 2025 high-risk list in January due to all of the problems the BOP is facing. A GAO highlighted BOP's, quote, long-standing staffing challenges present a serious threat to the safety of staff and incarcerated people. BOP also faces challenges with aging and deteriorating infrastructure, which likewise affects safety. It also needs improvements in planning for programs to prepare incarcerated persons for release. Better monitoring and evaluation are needed to improve management of the federal prison system, end quote. So does Trump take these issues and threats to safety seriously? Absolutely not. Instead, he made the deranged, delusional decision over the weekend to open up Alcatraz as a prison that was literally shut down because it was too expensive and too impractical to run. Honestly, you can't make this stuff up. Please tell me how any of this makes sense. Stripping Bureau employees of their collective bargaining rights, cutting pay and benefits at a time where the Bureau was ranked the worst place to work among all federal sub-agencies and offices, and we have more than 450 offices. Having staff like prison teachers, cooks, nurses, and monitors being forced to serve as correctional officers because BOP has too few officers to actually do the job, wanting to place even more of a strain on the system by trying to house migrants and children in Bureau facilities. It's absolutely ridiculous. Let me be clear. This isn't just a staff issue, it's a life or death issue. Reports by the Justice Department's Inspector General detailed how in over a third of the inmate suicides that occurred between fiscal years 2014 to 2021, BOP staff didn't sufficiently conduct the required inmate rounds or counts to check on the inmates. Let me tell y'all something. Realizing this fact took me back. I don't know what it's like to be a family member and to receive that phone call about your loved one that you would imagine is in one of the safest places ever, regardless of why they are there, and to find out that they somehow committed suicide. I don't know what it's like to be that loved one, but I do know what it's like to be that attorney and to get that call. To get the call that one of my clients somehow has managed to unfortunately take his life. This is unacceptable. And who knows how many lives could be saved. And while all of this is bad on its own, let's not forget about the fact that in all of the 120 correctional institutions under the Bureau's control, each needs some kind of repair at any given time, like Seagoville Federal Correctional Institution in Texas, for example, which is close to my district. 6 of the 8 buildings housing inmates had broken air conditioning units during the summer, where temperatures in Texas facilities can reach up to 110 degrees, and at least one unit topped 149 degrees. We need to get to the bottom of this and fix this organization before more and more deaths occur. Today's hearing is one of the few moments where actually I believe we can do something good in Congress, and I hope we do today. Because at the end of the day, this is about doing what's right. It's about protecting employees, it's about protecting lives, it's about ensuring we give people a second chance at life. So I want to thank the witnesses for being here today, and I look forward to participating in this important discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. I will now recognize the chairman of the Crime Subcommittee from the great state of Arizona, Andy Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the members of both subcommittees for coming together this morning. I thank Chairman Van Drew for his opening remarks. I thank the witnesses for being here and appreciate you. Look forward to your testimony today. Today's hearing is titled Federal.
Thank you. I now recognize Ms. Crockett from Texas.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. It is interesting that we're talking about bypassing Congress. It seems like that's all that has happened, actually, this Congress. In fact, it's why we've had to spend so much time in courts, and thank God that we at least have one branch of government that has decided not to abdicate their duties and has decided that there are things such as, you know, impoundment. And so when Congress does make a decision or does sign something into law or has been signed into law by a president, that you can't just bring in your good little friend who helped you get elected to the tune of $300 billion or $300 million and say, hey, guy, you get to do whatever you want to, despite what these duly elected people have done. But I digress. But I am going to get back to Elon, because Elon is looming over every single DOGE hearing. You know why? Because that's supposedly what Elon was heading up, but now they don't want to talk about Elon, because Elon now is a little upset. There's a family spat that's obviously going on, and it is going to play out, it seems like, all over Twitter. But nevertheless, let's talk about some of the things that we should be talking about. And you know what? Every time I come in here, I really do wonder, what is the point? Like, why are we here? Because it doesn't seem like we're doing efficiency, right? Like, have we seen Elon? No. Have we seen anybody that works for DOGE? No. But we're in the DOGE subcommittee and we're talking to everybody but the DOGE people. So to hear the comments about Stacey Abrams, it really got me going. And a lot of times when we come into this hearing room, it's all about politics. And it made me think that there was an issue most likely with Stacey, because someone actually brought up the fact that Stacey has run for governor a couple of times, and it seems like there's a gubernatorial race that's coming up in Georgia, and nobody knows whether or not Stacey is going to run. So why not muddy the water if we can to hopefully keep a strong black woman down? But again, I digress. So let's talk about the things that we could be talking about while we sit here in the DOGE committee. It seems like we could be talking about you know, things like efficiency or oversight. When announcing this hearing, the chairwoman stated the DOGE subcommittee would, quote, continue bringing long overdue transparency and accountability to those who abuse tax dollars. But so far this Congress, Republicans have focused their oversight responsibilities on things like defunding Big Bird, as well as attacking, of course, trans kids, because they're really the big threat that we have. We could be talking about how the Trump administration is ignoring these court orders, supporting American citizens, or targeting members of Congress for prosecution, or how Trump signed an order deregulating the cryptocurrency industry just as his family launched a digital currency. We could be having a hearing on how Trump fired members of the National Labor Relations Board for bringing a suit against Elon Musk, or how the Trump administration dismantled the Office of the Federal Contract Compliance while the office was investigating Tesla for alleged racial harassment, or how Trump dropped lawsuits against numerous large companies after they donated to his inaugural fund. We could have a hearing on whether Trump violated the emoluments clause when he not only, it seemed like he asked for a $400 million jet from a foreign government. Trump has put a for sale sign on the lawn of the White House and has allowed wealthy donors to dictate how the government operates. That's what we should be having a hearing about, but nope. They're here attacking nonprofits that deliver food to seniors and disabled folk, provide child care and elder care for working families, job training for teens, and shelter for the unhoused. The Republicans and their witnesses have accused nonprofits of being, quote, radical and, quote, addicted to government money. And listen, I try to find agreement where I can. So I am going to say that I absolutely do agree with that statement to a certain extent, because there is a nonprofit by the name of the Heritage Foundation. And last time I checked, the Heritage Foundation, they are the authors of Project 2025. And we are living through the hell of Project 2025 right now. And something tells me that that's a bit of a partisan thing, because they said it was the conservative playbook. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't know why we would ever look at the Heritage Foundation and think that it's anything but radical and, quote, addicted to government money potentially. So Ms. Yentl, before I do that, I'm gonna come to you because I want to make sure that I get these things on record. I have a unanimous consent, Madam Chair. It says Donald Trump allegedly asked aides whether Elon Musk's DOGE promises were all bull, and then you know what the rest of it is. Unanimous consent?
Without objection.
Thank you so much. I have another one from CBS News. Despite Trump's promised cuts, U.S. spent more than $200 billion more in the first 100 days than last year. If some reason we focused on some efficiency, we may have more money to work towards this deficit that some of my colleagues say that they're concerned about. And I guess, Ms. Yentl, I'm gonna run out of time, because if we were gonna focus on this deficit, then maybe you wouldn't have your own friends coming out and talking about how we're gonna have to lift the debt ceiling $5 trillion, because how else can we pay for the billionaires to keep more money in their pockets? Thank you, and I will yield.
The gentlelady yields, and for the record, the Heritage Foundation receives no federal funding. I now recognize Mr. Burchett from Tennessee.
Thank you, Chair Lady. I think the irony of all ironies here is that our friends across the aisle keep bringing up.
Mr. Chair, and thank you so much to our governors. And I want to say I apologize. I apologize for the abuse that you are facing in this committee that is supposed to be about waste, fraud, and abuse. And I also apologize for wasting your time, because this is nothing more than political theater. Now, again, this committee is supposed to be about waste, fraud, and abuse. We did not have to have this faux creation of DOGE. The committee itself, that is our job. So what I want to talk about is something that the American people may want to know, which is economically, how is this impacting them? These failed immigration policies that are only put on so that they can have a show, because we have a reality show president who seemingly still believes that this is all about TV instead of real lives. So let me talk about something really quickly, because I want to clarify something, because I believe that all of you understand the importance of something like tourism. Are you aware, any of you, are you aware as to whether or not tourism in the United States is anticipated to decrease to the extent that we are estimated to lose $12.5 billion in international vendor spending in just the year 2025?
I can answer as the tourism capital of the country.
I assume you could.
Tourism's already down. It is down in the North Country, where the Canadians refuse to come over because of the hostility toward their country. It's happening in New York City. It's happening at our sporting events here, our theater. There's a ripple effect throughout our entire economy because of the change in attitude that our country, that once welcomed people from all over the world, to visit and recreate and to live here now feels like a very hostile place to them. It is going to have an economic impact on our bottom line without a doubt.
So let's talk about it a little bit more. So I am supposed to have a number of FIFA games in Dallas, and I am fully anticipating that we are going to have a problem because I've been receiving phone calls that people don't feel safe coming here, and it's not the immigrants. It's this government that is making them feel unsafe. But let me also do this, because they love to cherry pick. They can find, any one person that has been killed, and if they've been killed by an immigrant, then God darn it, every single immigrant is going out and they are killers, and that is the problem. But they don't want to talk about white supremacy. I don't know how many hearings we gonna have about the fact that there's been this one immigrant that killed this one person. And no, I'm not excusing any killings by them or white supremacists, but they haven't had these hearings. We didn't have a hearing on Buffalo and what happened there. We didn't have a hearing on El Paso and what happened there. We didn't have a hearing on Charleston and what happened there. So it's interesting that they pick and choose, because it seems like they love to pal around with the white supremacists, and so they don't want to talk about certain other things. But economically, I want to make sure that we're making this point again, because I know that Governor Pritzker, you were the beneficiary of a lot of things from the state of Texas. And a lot of people believe that Republicans are fiscally responsible, but instead they are actually fiscally irresponsible, because what he spent was a whopping $221 million transporting people from Texas to your state. Something tells me that he could have done something else with that $221 million. In addition to that, I know that there's been some conversations about what's going on in LA, and they want to say that it's riots because they didn't want people to keep talking about, say, the Epstein files or whatever other drama was popping off between the president and his little friend. So they wanted to change the conversation to immigration because they feel like, well, the polling is in our benefit. But let me tell you something. If they cared about making sure we were going to be fiscally responsible, they would tell the American people that it cost them $134 million to send the National Guard to LA for the quote-unquote riots that the governor didn't ask for, nor did the mayor of LA ask for, and they sent them over there, and they say that they care about our service members, yet they sent them and they were laying on the floor. They did not provide for food. So I don't know why we would believe that, number one, they want to fix this. They don't want to fix this, because the brokenness is a feature, not a flaw of the system, because it is beneficial to them when it comes to campaigning. If they can't stoke fear, then why are they going to say have anybody vote for them? Because that's what people are doing. They're voting out of fear. But Ms. Perryman, we know each other a little well. And I know you got a law degree. And it seems like we all need law degrees in here nowadays to understand the Constitution. So really briefly, I just want to make this point. There is a certain person that was afforded, say, due process. But let's say if Donald Trump had been charged with all of these cases that he got charged with in 4 different jurisdictions, if he wasn't afforded due process, there could have been a possibility that he just would have been locked up and thrown somewhere, right?
That would be a possibility.
And then maybe we wouldn't have a tariff war or anything else that we're dealing with or all the other nonsense. But the point is, he was afforded due process, and regardless of the political opposition, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, I thought, believe that due process should be afforded to everybody, even him.
Due process is for everyone.
Okay, so the Fifth Amendment doesn't say that it's just for the people that are Americans?
It does not.
It says anybody on our soil?
It's for everyone.
Okay, it's pretty simple. I don't know why we are having...
Last 2 questions here.
This question is for Congresswoman Crockett. You served in the legislature. Can you talk about what your prediction would be for this moment? What do you think is about to happen if they gerrymander? Can you talk on that? Thank you.
Yeah, so first of all, it hasn't quite been said clearly that Texas has always been found to be intentionally discriminatory. And so I want y'all to understand the makeup of my state. The state is a majority minority state. And what this legislature historically has done is what they plan to do again, is to dilute the voices of people of color in order to make sure that they can get to where they're trying to go. We saw this Department of Justice decided to put out a letter, and what did they do? We only have 4 seats that are represented by Black folk, where the vast majority of the people that get to decide who they have represent them are Black. They decided to attack 3 of the 4 seats that we have in the state. They decided to go after a Latina. They are specifically deciding to splinter the communities of common interest, as well as just blatantly say, we are going to dilute minority voices. So we know that the courts, ever since we've had a Voting Rights Act, have always found this state to be intentionally discriminatory. That is what they are going to do. So I need people of color to understand that the scheme of the Republicans has consistently been to make sure that they mute our voices so that they can go ahead and have an oversized say in this. So I fully anticipate that's exactly where they're going with this map. It's the only way to do it. We didn't understand how we got to the map that they gave us last time because that state was grown by 95% people of color. They went out of their way to make sure that we got 0 new seats for people of color. So that's exactly what they're going to do this time.
It's ongoing litigation right now that challenges the constitutionality of the current map and the legality of the current map as it relates to the 1965 Voting Rights Act, and all of our legal options will continue to be on the table.
Ms. Crockett.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much to our witnesses for being here. Unfortunately, we are witnessing today yet another political stunt, plain and simple. Republicans are here drawing a clear line in the sand. They will stop at nothing to advance Donald Trump's agenda and the dangerous blueprint laid out in Project 2025, even if it means targeting the very groups that are working to protect our communities and support our law enforcement agencies. Let's be clear, my colleagues across the aisle have shown little to no interest in working with Democrats on real solutions for the American people. Instead of addressing pressing civil rights issues constituents actually care about, like wrongful deportations of U.S. citizens, ongoing efforts to undermine voting rights, or the serious flaws in our criminal justice system, this committee is spending its time holding a hearing with a title that sounds like it was ripped from a conspiracy blog. This hearing, How Leftist Nonprofit Networks Exploit Federal Tax Dollars to Advance a Radical Agenda. Really? I mean, when I listened to you, Mr. Chairman, who I do respect, I heard you say things about why is it that we're giving money in other places? And I want to make sure that I answer that question, because to put America first looks like we are going to keep American citizens safe. There is a such thing as soft power, and that is exactly what we were trying to do when we engaged in things such as USAID. When you start to talk about whether or not Sesame Street or anything else that's on NPR or PBS ends up in other places, this is so that there is not this warped thought process about the Western world or about the United States. We're talking about making sure that we don't end up allowing people to be radicalized against us because they have a terrible vision of us, because they may be in a government that actually puts out bad, terrible propaganda about us. So for pennies on the dollar, we are able to educate those around the world on who we really are in America and keep Americans safe. Soft power is real power, and it minimizes how much money we have to spend, say, on dropping bombs in countries at a random time without, say, congressional authority. But I digress. This kind of rhetoric, whether directed at nonprofits, their leaders, or elected officials, is not only reckless, it is beneath the dignity of this institution. And sadly, this isn't the first time this has happened. Over the past 6 months, we've seen hearing after hearing do nothing but attack nonprofits, as well as those who are just generally on a mission to serve, protect, and uplift vulnerable communities. In just my own committees, this has got to be the second or third time I've had to sit through the same tired narrative. If my Republican colleagues are truly concerned about taxpayer dollars being misused for political agendas, I'd encourage them to take a long, hard look in the mirror. But since we're here again, spending more of the American people's money and time on political theater, let's at least stick to the facts. Fact. Under the Trump administration, the Department of Justice stripped hundreds of millions of dollars from the Office of Justice programs, money that funded essential community safety initiatives like victim services, gang prevention, and reentry support. Fact, Trump and Republicans slashed grants to organizations like the National Organization for Victim Assistance, which trains advocates who staff domestic violence shelters, hotlines, and rape crisis centers. Fact, they cut over $10 million in funding to the National Policing Institute, a nonprofit helping rural police departments reduce violent crime. Fact, this week, Republicans are trying to gut PEPFAR, a life-saving program that partners with nonprofits around the world and has saved more than 26 million lives. And let's not forget, many of these cuts were laid out in Project 2025, a radical far-right playbook drafted by hyper-conservative nonprofits for the express purpose of dismantling the very government institutions and systems that serve the public good. Ironically, we even have one of the authors of Project 2025 here with us today. So let's not pretend this is about nonprofit accountability, because if it were, this committee would also be investigating the Conservative Partnership Institute, which has pushed anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ+, and anti-vaccine propaganda and hosted efforts to challenge the 2020 election. Mind you, as we have these organizations that are pushing anti-vaccine propaganda, we know that measles has reached a 30-year high when measles had actually been over and done with. But now that we don't believe in vaccines, now children are our targets, unfortunately, and yes, they are dying. The New Century Foundation, a white nationalist organization that somehow maintains its 501c3 status to launder hate speech through the language of intellectual inquiry. Or they would investigate Turning Point USA, which has been linked to organizers of the January 6th insurrection. But Republicans aren't talking about those groups because this isn't about accountability. It's about silencing organizations that challenge Republican power. It's about targeting nonprofits that protect the very people this Trump-aligned movement continues to harm. These organizations are defending victims of unlawful actions. They're helping to combat global pandemics. They're supporting police departments when this very committee won't. They're working to build safer, healthier communities while Trump and his allies defund them to hand out tax breaks to billionaires. And maybe that's the real threat here. They're effective. They get people off the streets, out of prison, and into opportunity. They educate people about injustice, and that apparently scares some folks more than any so-called radical agenda. Because the only thing truly radical about these nonprofits is their belief that human beings deserve dignity, opportunity, and equal protection under the law. Values my Republican colleagues seem to have forgotten, along with love thy neighbor. So instead of demonizing the groups trying to do right by our communities, maybe we should be asking how to support them, how to ensure taxpayer dollars reach the people who need them most, because this hearing should be about public safety, not political vendettas. Until that happens, these hearings are doing more harm than good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
We will now hear from Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I have to make sure I don't get in trouble back home in Texas. So let me be really clear. These maps, racist. The fact that they are trying to silence Black and minority voters in a majority minority state, racist. Pulling all of the economic engines out of certain districts, also racist. The bottom line is this is a Republican-led and racist attempt to make sure that we silence the voices of Black and brown people. Now, I want to give y'all some numbers because I don't think that y'all fully understand how bad this is. Texas, number one, has more African Americans than any other state in this country. Right now, under the proposed maps, they want to make it to where Texas only has 2 districts in which African Americans have an opportunity to choose their representation. What does that mean for Black voices in Texas? That means that it is approximately 1/5 the voting strength of their white Texan neighbors. That is what it's going to be, not 3/5, but we are going to be reduced to 1/5. So my colleagues have laid out a number of things that they believe is going on as to why it is that this is happening, but I'm gonna start with number one, Trump himself. He's racist. I've been saying that. I said that during the campaign. Anybody that would adopt the objectives of Project 2025, truly believes in a racist ideology. But also, he has been very clear about retribution. Retribution because Black people had the audacity to have some sense and didn't want to go back to a time where Black unemployment was at a historic high like it is right now. Retribution because Black people didn't want even less access to health care in a country that continues to have an abysmal maternal mortality rate as it relates to Black women. Retribution because Black people didn't want to endure a supercharged police state like we are seeing with the invasion of Black-run cities. Retribution because Black women somehow became the most educated demographic in this country. They are trying to drown our voices out, but we will not be silenced. They've tried to bury us before, not knowing that we were seeds. We will grow and we will be resilient, just as we have time and time before. The final note that I'll mark for you is I know what we can do when we just come together as a country. Because as it's been stated over and over, 60 years ago, we ended up with the Voting Rights Act. And you know who signed that into law? A good Texan, LBJ. Texas can do better. Texas historically has done better. And so while we are fighting this in the courts, please believe, just know that the fight that the people are going to put up in the state of Texas is going to be a big fight no matter what happens, and we will win.
Okay, Ms. Crockett.
And Mr. Chair, before I begin, I do have two UCs that seemingly work really well right here. One says farm bankruptcies in 2025 already exceed 2024 levels. That is from Hoosier Ag. And the second one says farm bankruptcies rising in 2025. All right. The reason that I wanted to talk about farming is because it seems like we think that we can talk about things in some sort of vacuum. You can't talk about healthy children if you don't talk about whether or not they have money to access any food, whether it's good or bad. Some would argue that if you don't have money to access food at all, whether it's good or bad, it's probably bad for the child to not have anything in their body. The reason that those on my side of the aisle keep bringing up these cuts is because we know that we already have a hunger problem in this country. Considering the fact that we have a hunger problem in this country, it's now only been compounded by the poor policies of this administration and House Republicans as well as Senate Republicans. You see, I don't believe that you can just have a mantra where you say, make America healthy again, without actually doing the work, because as the good book says, faith without works is dead. So let's talk about the work that really needs to be done. Number one, it's in policy. Policy that doesn't look like ridiculous tariffs that unfortunately now have our farmers going under. In fact, to be very specific, farm bankruptcies are up 55% compared to 2023. Which minimizes the amount of food that we do have that will be available, and ultimately that food will be more expensive because that's simple economics, yet at the same time, the $6 a day that people get to eat, that's going away. And besides the SNAP benefits themselves, we're talking about those kids that only get their food at school, and we are able to set the guidelines for whether or not that's healthy food or not. The reality is that I am so disturbed because under this Department of Health and Human Services, literally, they have become the threat to the American people. Serving from the state of Texas, unfortunately, we had to endure the very beginning of the measles outbreak. For the first time in 20 years, children are dying. That doesn't look like making us healthier again. In fact, a lot of people want to talk about measles, but the plague is back now. We had our first contact of that recently came out. And we know how the secretary feels about polio. Polio may end up coming back. Right now, President Trump, Secretary Kennedy, and congressional Republicans are perpetuating the most significant public health attack on Americans ever. In just a few months, they have diminished HHS's ability to respond to outbreaks and emerging health threats. They've dismantled teams that ensure Americans are consuming safe foods. They've weaponized the federal government against universities performing world-class research. They've implemented the most significant cut to healthcare in American history. These people hate it when American families have access to healthcare. They hate it when American families have access to healthy foods. They hate it when American families have access to affordable housing. They hate it when American families have access to affordable childcare, because these people simply hate America. Nearly everything they have done makes Americans less safe and less healthy. The consequences of their actions are simple. More children will die and have. More children will go hungry. More children will live in extreme poverty. More children living with disabilities will lose access to school-based therapies and services. So, Dr. Fink, you're here to rubber stamp this agenda, an agenda that's so unpopular the Republicans are deciding to cheat in next year's elections. But nevertheless, let's talk about it. Dr. Fink, in 2021, you provided a presentation at the University of North Texas Health Speakers Bureau titled Women's Health. Do you remember that, yes or no?
Yes, I do.
Well, during this presentation, you spoke at length about the importance of vaccines. In fact, one of your slides stated, quote, clusters of under or non-immunization have the potential to foster transmission of vaccine-preventable diseases, including measles. Is this a slide from your presentation, yes or no?
I haven't reviewed that presentation recently,
so we're going to go you don't know. You work under someone who has become the face of the anti-vax movement. So who's right, you or the secretary?
Thank you so much for that.
You or the secretary?
I would like to tell you that Secretary
You or the
Kennedy
secretary?
is challenging us to use gold standard.
So you're going to
practices
filibuster,
together.
and I only have 25 seconds. So I'm going to go with you, assume you, but you know that he's your boss. This administration has lost all credibility with the American people and our global partners. No one believes you care about improving health outcomes when you're slashing NIH research into Alzheimer's disease, women's health, cancer, and diabetes. No one believes you care about public health when you cut programs that support maternal and child health and eliminate Healthy Start. No one believes you care about children when you implement the largest cut to Medicaid in history. Americans know the truth, and the truth is that this administration, with the help of congressional Republicans, has unleashed the most significant assault on public health in American history. The people will die as a result. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Chair recognizes Ms. Crockett from Texas.
Okay, I'm going to try to go really fast because I got a lot to cover. So I'm starting with the AG. I want you to tell me whether or not it's lawful or lawless ignoring court orders,
That's lawless.
impounding congressional funds,
Violates the law.
invoking emergency powers when there is no emergency,
Unlawful.
sending troops without an invite,
Violates the law.
covering for pedophiles. I just threw that one in there. Okay, I'll move to the next one. What about revoking birthright citizenship?
Violates the 14th Amendment of the Constitution.
How about violating due process?
Violates the 5th and 14th Amendment of the Constitution.
How about what we see happening with redistricting that would in some way minimize, if not delete, the voices of people of color as they are going through and illegally going through this process? Is there a constitutional amendment that you can think of that is associated with that?
Probably many, but it is
Okay.
unlawful and unconstitutional and un-American.
Thank you. As well as, can you tell me if it is lawful or lawless to violate free speech?
That's lawless.
Okay, sounds about right, because, you know, we had to have a conversation about Jimmy Kimmel, so I'm going to say free Jimmy Kimmel for sure, and hopefully we will deal with the FCC chairman. But the reason that I wanted to go through that long list, and that was actually not even the half of it, is because since this administration has come in on January 20th, they have engaged in some form of every single thing that I said on that list, even the part about covering for pedophiles. So my question is, why are we sitting here today? Number one, they already passed their bootleg laws, and it's clear that even the bill author is not well informed about what his bill does. Because as has already been stated, at the age of 18, you are an adult. So this idea that somehow 21-year-olds were now somehow juveniles under DC law, is that accurate or inaccurate?
It was inaccurate, misunderstood the way the law works.
Correct. Could not understand how to read the law and decided that they were going to rewrite the law and mess up the law. And to be clear, we were talking about judges being able to have enough discretion to decide whether or not they were going to give someone an opportunity maybe to clean their record, such as the bill author was given that opportunity under Florida law because his second felony was picked up when he was 21, to be clear. So he was older than 18. And under this law, if you were under, 25, so 24 or under, then the judges had discretion, correct?
But only in certain kinds of cases, not the most serious cases. And in fact, that discretion was, as we know, exercised very rarely. And it would have been an opportunity had the Congress wanted to talk with the folks who are involved in applying that law and seeing how it works, to understand that this is not a law that's out of sync with other states, and it's working.
Thank you so much. And the reason that it matters is because now the gentleman from Florida is trying to become a governor, and chances are maybe D.C., once they get statehood, could have had a future governor that had a second chance. But since they don't want other people to have chances that they've been given, they want to just pretend like they are bigger and better and badder than. So I will move on because I am frustrated that we are having this hearing when we know that this administration can't take care of their own business. As we know, they recently illegally bombed yet another Venezuelan boat, and we may be headed for a war. We know that this particular president has decided that he wants to shake down people as it relates to the First Amendment because he has filed not one lawsuit, not two lawsuits, but he has filed numerous lawsuits. He filed a lawsuit against the New York Times. He filed one against the Wall Street Journal, against CBS, against ABC, against the Des Moines Register. He is doing all of this because he wants to quash any speech that is not appreciative or lauding him, which is pretty much anything that's factual. So let's talk a few facts about these January 6 felons that should still be incarcerated because they went through the process, but because they were doing things on his behalf, of course, he wanted to let them go. So they released more than 1,000 people who participated in the insurrection on this government, many of whom had previous criminal records, like Mr. Theodore Mendenforth, who was convicted of predatory criminal sexual assault of a child, or Mr. Peter Schwartz, who had 38 prior convictions, including one where he beat his wife by repeatedly punching and biting her. Trump also pardoned Mr. David Daniel, who was convicted of production and possession of child pornography. Trump also pardoned Mr. Daniel Ball, who, quote, threw an explosive device that detonated upon at least 25 officers during the Capitol riot. He also had a record for, quote, domestic violence by strangulation. I'm not done. Trump also pardoned Mr. Andrew Taki, who sent nudes to an undercover law enforcement officer who was posing as a 15-year-old girl. Mr. Casey Hopkins also received a pardon from Trump, and Mr. Hopkins was convicted of forcible rape. According to court records, he, quote, had forcible intercourse with the victim, choked her to the point of impairing her vision, banged her head into a wall, and urinated into the victim's mouth as he humiliated her. These are the people that he decided to release in the streets of D.C. So if anybody does need to clean up D.C., I would agree it is this man, because he is the one that is causing half the crime that we have. Not only is he participating in the crime, but we know that he instigated the insurrection. And if I did say that I had one issue with the Biden-Harris administration, it is the fact that they did not move forward and make sure that this man was put where he should have been put. Because the last time I checked as a criminal defense attorney, and Mr. Attorney General, you may have a different experience, but I never had a defendant that had 34 convictions for felonies and did not spend one day in jail. Never in my life. And the last time I checked, the party of law and order is the only one that decided that they would be out of order and decided to nominate someone who was not only indicted but was actually convicted of multiple felonies. That has never happened in this country, and it is a shame that we are dealing with it now, and now he wants to tell y'all how to do your jobs.
Okay. I thought you were going to say when you had one problem with the Bidens, I thought it was going to be on the pardons, all the pardons at the auto pen pardon.
It's on the fact that they did.
Okay, all right, okay.
So much. I move to strike the last words.
Gentlelady is recognized.
And so a couple of things. My not friend from Texas specifically cut me off by the time that I wanted to indicate to him a couple of things. One thing y'all have not said thus far as I can tell, is y'all may have amnesia about this mandate. You know, y'all kept talking about how President Trump was reelected and it was a mandate. And y'all aren't talking about the campaign promises. The campaign promise that he made. You see, when we had the Democrats out there, we weren't promising anything about the Epstein files. For all I know, our DOJ was invested in making sure that they could continue to reveal other people that should be held liable. Instead, it was your side that made this a campaign promise. So to now say that we are playing political games when we know that he actually ran on this is a farce. That's number one. Number two, everyone on this committee and everyone in Congress should have an issue with the fact that right now we know that Ghislaine Maxwell has not only been transferred out of her housing in Florida down to somewhere that looks probably a little bit more like Mar-a-Lago in Texas, but now there are conversations about pardoning her. So I think that the American people should have full transparency about what took place when you're talking about someone who went in front of a grand jury and was found to have enough information to go forward and indict her, and then she was convicted, and then she was given 20 years, yet the president is in talks about potentially letting a convicted sex offender out. That's number two. Number three, I don't know if any of y'all took the time to sit down with any of these survivors, but let me be clear. These survivors have made it abundantly clear to us that there was cooperation at all levels of government, and they are talking about fake immigration papers. And they're talking about fake modeling agencies. For all we know, there are people that are still embedded in our federal government that allowed for this to take place, that were profiting from this. So yes, this is relevant to what we're talking about. The fourth thing that I want to say is I'm tired of y'all cherry picking one horrible event, because that's what y'all do. Y'all find one terrible situation that took place, and then you say that person's name and you wear it out and you make it political. The reality is this. I got a few names for you if you want to start going through names, and you tell me which one of these names you've decided to do any type of legislation behind. We've got Virginia Guffrey. We've got Annie Farmer. We've got Maria Farmer. We've got Courtney Wild, Michelle Licata, Jenna Lisa Jones, Jennifer Araz, Sarah Ransom, Shantae Davies, Carolyn Adriano. And the reality is that it's our understanding that there may be close to 1,000 victims of Epstein, Maxwell, and others. So stop playing these games and acting like you care about one particular situation. You take a situation and then you exploit what has happened to not only that person, but you exploit those families and you make it a game. Stop just throwing a random dead person's name on something for your own political expediency. If you want to start talking about actually solving something, then maybe we should go to the other campaign promises, the ones that allegedly gave y'all a mandate. When he said he was going to lower prices on day one, yet that didn't happen. When he said that he was going to be ending wars on day one, yet that didn't happen. Where he said that he was going to save the American people, yet that didn't happen. Because as we know, in that big ugly bill that every single one of you voted for, except for Mr. Massey, because he seemingly is the only one that's got any sense over there, y'all voted for that bill. And the last time I checked, it's driving us further into debt while kicking people off of their health care, in addition to making sure that billionaires, which I would not be surprised if we start to roll out those names, and a number of those same billionaires, because these weren't $2, well, they weren't $2 Johns. That's not what I got from the information. So stop telling us that you care. Show us that you care. Show those survivors that you care. Sign the daggone discharge petition, sit down and hear their stories, and then tell them to their faces that because your leader does not want to talk about this, that is who you have pledged your loyalty to and your fealty to, and you're not going to protect them, and you're not going to protect others that are suffering right now and others that will suffer in the future, and I will yield.
Crockett.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for calling this hearing. Since January, Donald Trump has used the full power of the federal government to attack Americans in cities across the country. In Donald Trump's America, you are at increased risk of experiencing militaristic operations in your home, increased risk of being subject to detainment by mass thugs and wannabe vigilantes, increased risk of suffering injuries due to reckless and illegal acts by rogue federal agents, increased risk of being deported to foreign nations even if you are an American citizen, and you're at an increased risk of being targeted by federal government for criticizing the president and his friends. Congressional Republicans have completely abandoned their Article I powers and have exchanged their responsibility to their constituents with fealty to the president. They have allowed the president to morph federal agencies into instruments of autocracy. And as a result, the president has been able to ignore federal law, disregard court orders, and implement the largest pay-for-play scheme in American history. The White House, well, what's left of it anyway, is literally up for sale. The federal courts have characterized this presidency as, quote, lawless. In fact, when ruling against illegal acts committed by the administration, a Republican-appointed federal judge stated, quote, the court cannot imagine how the public interest might be served by permitting federal officials to flaunt the very laws they have sworn to enforce. In a separate case where the administration was sued for unlawful acts, the judge, also a Republican appointee, stated, quote, allowing constitutional rights to be dependent upon the grace of the executive branch would be a dereliction of duty by this third and independent branch of government and would be against the public interest. But in another case, the court summed it up perfectly by declaring, quote, as is becoming far too common, we are confronted again with the efforts of the executive branch to set aside the rule of law in pursuit of its own goals. Judiciary Committee Republicans have been completely complicit in this corruption. But since they're so interested in restoring law and order, I have a couple of suggestions on where they can start. Number one, this is the President of the United States standing beside his best friend, Jeffrey Epstein. As we all know, Mr. Epstein is one of the most notorious sexual predators in American history. For 8 weeks, the Republicans on this committee have chosen to protect these two men instead of providing justice to Mr. Epstein's victims. Now the administration is panicking. First, they campaigned on releasing the Epstein files. Then AG Bondi and Associates did a photo op with the files, and she said, and I quote, the Epstein list is on my desk. Then somehow the Epstein list didn't exist. Then the Epstein files became a Democratic hoax. Now the president is supposedly supportive of releasing the files, even though he's currently ignoring a congressional subpoena to do so. Now the president is simply crashing out. And it's because he can't seem to explain his special decades-long relationship with one of the most prominent sexual predators in American history. It's already public that he's in the Epstein files, but his administration is hiding the context of his involvement, if any, with Mr. Epstein's horrific crimes. Now, this is Miss Ghislaine Maxwell. Miss Maxwell, who obviously helped Jeffrey Epstein traffic more than 1,000 women and girls, well, Donald Trump is now giving her special treatment while she's serving out her prison sentence. He won't even rule out giving her a pardon or commuting her sentence. I don't need to explain why pardoning sex traffickers wouldn't be restoring law and order. Now, this is Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. Not only has Secretary Noem been busy filming propaganda ads, she's also been busy cashing in on millions of taxpayer dollars. In fact, Secretary Noem has funneled millions of dollars to a company called the Strategy Group. The Strategy Group helped Secretary Noem win her campaign to become the governor of South Dakota. Corey Lewandowski, her top policy advisor, has worked with the firm. And the company's CEO is married to Secretary Noem's chief spokesperson, Mrs. Tricia McLaughlin. This is what corruption looks like. They're stealing money from the American people's pockets and depositing it into their bank accounts. Now we move on to yet somebody else. This is the so-called border czar, Tom Homan. Mr. Homan is on tape accepting $50,000 in cash bribes stuffed in a brown paper bag from an undercover FBI agent. Apparently, Mr. Homan accepted these bribes in exchange for awarding federal contracts to his friends. Trump's Department of Justice killed the investigation into Mr. Homan's crimes, and congressional Republicans didn't say a mumbling word. Lastly, this is insurrectionist and Nazi sympathizer Ed Martin. It appears that Mr. Martin is functioning as the Associate Deputy Attorney General, Pardon Attorney, Director of the Fake Weaponization Working Group, and Special Attorney for Mortgage Fraud. All that means is that Mr. Martin is Trump's lapdog, whom the president sends to initiate lawsuits against the president's perceived political opponents. This is what we call organized crime. They're breaking the law, often by stealing taxpayer dollars, covering up their crimes by ending and obstructing investigations, then prosecuting people who call out their unlawful behavior. And while the Republicans are encouraging this corruption, they're abandoning actual victims of violent crime and ignoring the Republican-led state's 21st century murder crisis. In September's appropriation markup, congressional Republicans proposed reducing the FBI staff by thousands of positions and underfunding the agency by more than $1 billion. They've proposed slashing resources from the ATF. They've proposed cutting grants for juvenile justice programs and hate crimes and eliminating the community violence intervention and prevention grants. They're literally defunding the police. So no matter what they say at today's hearing, congressional Republicans have proven that they are not investing in keeping American communities safe from violent crime. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.